Hello everyone, welcome back to GraveTales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. Okay, I want you to leave a comment on where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, be sure to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get into tonight's stories. Story 1. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just looking for cheaper rent. It was late November when I lost my job. Nothing dramatic. It's just one of those slow, creeping collapses where hours get cut, projects disappear, and suddenly there's no paycheck coming in. I'd been living alone in a modest one-bedroom near downtown, but with bills stacking up and unemployment dragging. I knew I had to make a change. I didn't have much of a social circle at the time, and I couldn't bear the idea of moving back in with family. So I did what a lot of desperate people do. I went to Craigslist. Most of the roommate ads were either spam, horror shows in their own right, you know? It's the kind that say 420 friendly and you sleep in the living room corner, or a had fake photos of cluttered basements and stained mattresses. But then I saw Eli's post. Quiet, clean, professional, seeks roommate for a 2-bedroom apartment. Private room, $550 a month. Shared kitchen and bath. No pets, no parties. It was weirdly perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But when you're broke, desperate, and rationalizing like your life depends on it, your standards get slippery. The pictures showed a clean, sparsely furnished unit, plain white walls, beige carpet, a nondescript couch. It wasn't modern or cozy, but it looked lived in, and most importantly, it looked safe. I emailed him that night. He responded less than an hour later. His message was short, polite. Said he worked nights in IT and wasn't home much. Asked if I could come by the next day to see the place. When I showed up, buzzed me in without even asking who it was. The building was older brick, 3 stories, with those creaky wooden stairs that echoed with every footstep. The hallway smelled like old carpet and a hint of bleach. His unit was at the very end. When he opened the door, I remembered immediately thinking, this guy looks normal. Average height, pale, early 30s. Dressed like someone you'd walk past in a hardware store and not remember. No tattoos, no smile, just a kind of blank expression that wasn't unfriendly. Just ... distant. Eli, he said, offering a firm handshake. His voice was low, like he hadn't used it in a while. The apartment looked like the photos. Spotless, quiet. The windows were shut, blinds drawn. The kitchen had nothing but plain white dishes, and the fridge was nearly empty. Just almond milk and a single Tupperware of rice. We made small talk. I told him I used to work in marketing. He nodded and said he did data stuff. I asked what kind. He just shrugged. Okay, a bit of everything. He showed me the room. Mine, if I wanted it. It had no decorations, no furniture, besides a mattress on the floor and a small desk. The closet was empty. The walls were clean. There was something about it that felt ... sterile. I'm quiet, he said. I work nights, so I'm usually not around. Don't have friends over. Just keep to myself. Half the time. That sounded like a dream. After a few minutes, he looked at me and said, if you want it, you can move in tonight. There was no background check, no ID, no security deposit. Just a brief moment of eye contact that felt colder than it should have, and a simple agreement. Don't go in my room. That's my only rule. I moved in 2 days later. The first few weeks were uneventful. True to his word, Eli was barely around. I'd hear the front door open and close at odd hours, sometimes 2 or 3 a.m., but he kept to himself. I never saw him eat, never smelled food, no music, no TV, just the faint sound of a white noise machine humming from behind his door. That was the first thing I noticed. The sound. His bedroom door was always closed, always locked, and always had this constant shiz sound leaking from the bottom, like static from a dead channel. One night, I asked about it, trying to make conversation. Oh, he said, I don't sleep well without it. Drowns everything else out. I nodded and pretended that made sense, but I had questions. What exactly was he drowning out? I brushed it off at first, told myself I'd lived with weirder people in college. Everyone has their quirks, but over time, little things started to stick out. The way he never looked in mirrors. The bathroom mirror was always fogged up when he left, not just from steam, but like he'd wiped it purposefully with a towel, so his reflection couldn't show. I started noticing he wouldn't make eye contact, even in conversation. His pupils seemed almost too still, like he wasn't blinking enough. He never got mail, never used the stove, and he didn't have a single personal item in the common space. Keys left on the counter, no shoes at the door. It was like he hovered through the space without ever touching it. Once, I knocked on his door by mistake. I'd meant to grab something from the linen closet, and I tapped his door instead. I froze the second my knuckle hit it. Within seconds, I heard him move, not walk, move, like he slid across the floor. He opened the door about 2 inches, just enough to show one eye. "You need something?" he said. "No, sorry, wrong door." He stared for a beat too long, then closed it silently. But the weirdest thing, the part I still think about, happened about 3 weeks after I moved in. I woke up around 4 a.m. to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was the white noise machine, but this was different, softer, rhythmic, like someone was reciting something under their breath. I sat up, trying to tell if it was coming from Eli's room. I pressed my ear to the wall between our rooms. The static was still there, but underneath it, I swear I heard him whispering a name. Over and over, I couldn't make it out. Something like Lena or Mira. It stopped when I knocked on the wall. The white noise continued, but the whispering didn't come back. I didn't sleep after that. I stared at my ceiling until the sun came up, heart pounding for no clear reason. And in the morning, I made coffee like normal. Eli walked into the kitchen like he hadn't been chanting in the dark 5 hours ago. He nodded at me, grabbed a cup, and poured his without a word before he left. He turned to me and said, "You talk in your sleep," he said flatly. "Last night, thought I heard you say something." Then he left. I hadn't spoken a word all night, but I was sure he had. I think the first time I realized something was seriously off about Eli was the night I saw the door shake. It was subtle, just a tremble, like someone had kicked it gently from the inside. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been walking down the hall in the dark, trying to find my phone charger. The light under his door was on, nothing unusual there, but just as I passed, the door gave a slight thud, like someone had thrown their shoulder against it. I stopped, listened, waited. Nothing. I stared at that door for a full minute, barely breathing. Then I moved on, telling myself it was probably a draft or a heavy book falling off a shelf. The thing is, Eli didn't have a bookshelf. In fact, I had never seen anything even remotely personal in that room. I'd never been inside, and to my knowledge, no one else had either. He kept the door locked at all times, always, even when he was home. And the longer I lived with him, I became fixated on what was behind it. I'm not the paranoid type, okay? I've lived with messy people, quiet people, even a guy who used to microwave tuna at 2 a.m. and eat it in the dark like some kind of prison goblin. I can tolerate weird, but with Eli, it wasn't just weird, it was wrong. There were signs I couldn't ignore anymore, like the smell. It wasn't there all the time, only every now and then, usually in the middle of the night. A sour, metallic scent, like rust and old meat. It came and went quickly, vanishing before I could trace it. I bought candles, air fresheners, cleaned the sink trap, but it always returned, okay? And it was always strongest outside his room. One night, I caught him just as he was coming home. He looked disheveled, not in the usual long day at work kind of way, but like he'd been crawling through something. His sleeves were rolled up, and there was dark grime under his fingernails. I asked him if he was okay. He smiled, just barely, and said, "Yeah, just digging around in the past." I didn't even know how to respond to that. He walked right past me and shut his door. Click, locked again. I started checking the door when he left for work. Always locked, deadbolt, engaged. I even tested it a few times just to be sure. Then one afternoon, I heard him leave his usual soft footsteps. The jingle of keys, the front door closing. I waited a good 5 minutes, then crept down the hallway. I don't even know what I was hoping for, that maybe he forgot to lock it, that maybe I'd finally catch a glimpse of what was inside. I reached for the knob and gently turned it. Still locked, but as I stepped away, I heard something from inside. A soft tick-tick-tick sound, like metal tapping against glass, repetitive, slow, like a metronome set to the rhythm of a heartbeat. Then silence. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. No breathing. No static. No movement. I was about to turn away when I noticed something at the base of the door. A tiny red smear, about the size of a thumbprint. I knelt down and squinted. It was dried, almost black. I reached out to touch it, but as I did, I heard footsteps behind me, fast, deliberate ones coming up the hall. I turned around so fast I nearly fell backward. It wasn't Eli. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Duvall, mid-60s, sharp eyes. Kay, always wearing those same floral slippers. She narrowed her eyes at me, then looked at the door. "Don't go in there," she said, like she'd caught me stealing cookies from a church bake sale. He doesn't like that. I stood up quickly, brushing off my knees. I wasn't. I just dropped something. She raised an eyebrow. "You think you're the first one to try?" I froze. "What do you mean?" She leaned in, whispering, "He's had other roommates. You're the first one to last more than a month." Then she turned and walked away without another word. That night, couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak and groan of the apartment amplified in my ears. I kept thinking about what she'd said. Other roommates. Did something happen to them? I Googled the apartment complex. Nothing unusual. It's just a few noise complaints and someone reporting rats in the laundry room. Criminal reports. No missing persons. I searched Eli's full name, or at least what he'd given me. Eli Winters. Nothing came up. Not even a LinkedIn. No social media. No trace of the man I was living with. Then I remembered something. During our first week, as roommates, he'd signed for a package in my name when I was out. He left a sticky note on the box, and I'd saved it in my drawer. For whatever reason, I dug it out. The handwriting was small and deliberate. No flourishes. Block letters. Package at the door. Eli. I opened a new tab and searched for handwriting recognition tools. Yeah, I know. Borderline conspiracy theorist behavior. But I was desperate for answers. After some fumbling around, I found a forum for amateur sleuths who specialized in cold cases. I uploaded the image and asked if anyone recognized the handwriting. Said I was helping a friend identify an anonymous note from someone possibly connected to an old incident. Within a few hours, someone replied with a link. It was to a PDF, archive of scanned police reports from a case nearly 10 years old. Location, a small town 2 hours north of us. Victim, female, 24 years old. Last seen entering a shared home with a roommate named Elijah Warren. The report included part of a handwritten note left on her fridge. The handwriting was almost identical. I just stared at my screen for the longest time, heart hammering in. My chest, same block letters, same slanted E, same subtle curve on the capital P. They'd never found her. And according to the report, Elijah vanished the day after she went missing. I didn't go to the police, not yet. I didn't know what to say. Hey, my roommate might be a murderer because he writes his E's weird and his door smells like meat. No, I needed more. Something real. Something solid. And then, 2 days later, I got it. Eli went out around midnight. I watched him from the peephole. He was carrying a backpack, wearing gloves, dressed in black from head to toe. As soon as the front door shut, I ran to his room, still locked. But this time, I was ready. I'd borrowed a bump key from a friend of mine who used to be a locksmith. I told him it was for a project. I watched hours of YouTube tutorials until I felt confident I wouldn't screw it up. My hands were shaking as I slid the key in. Dot 1, hit 2, tot click. The door creaked open. The smell hit me first. Rancid, sickly, sweet. It made my eyes water. I stepped inside and immediately regretted it. The room was wrong. Everything was too clean, too calculated. The walls were lined with black plastic sheeting, like something out of a crime scene or a horror movie. In the center was a single wooden chair. No cushions, just a chair, facing the wall. The white noise machine was on the floor, humming softly. There were no clothes, no decorations, no bed, but there was a closet. I walked over, every instinct in me screaming to turn back. I opened the door. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, all identical, labeled in thick black marker, 1A, 2B, 3C, and so on. I opened one. Inside, a pair of shoes, women's worn, the soles caked with dried mud. Another box had a phone, screen shattered, still had a lock screen photo of a smiling girl with braces. Underneath it, a lock of hair, tied with a red ribbon. The last box I opened was different. No shoes, no hair, just a Polaroid dot of me, taken from outside the apartment window. I was at my desk, typing on my laptop. Unaware, written, across the bottom in red ink. Roommate number 5. Quiet sleeper. I dropped the box and ran back in my room. I locked the door, shoved my dresser in front of it, sat in the corner with the kitchen knife in my lap. I don't know how long I sat there. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just sat and listened, waited. At 3:17 a.m., the front door opened. Soft footsteps padded across the living room. Then silence. I heard the bedroom door close, and lock. Then the white noise returned. After I broke into Eli's room, I didn't sleep for 3 straight days. I didn't go to work, didn't answer calls, didn't eat anything that wasn't shelf-stable and sealed. I locked myself in my bedroom, armed with a crowbar and a camping knife I ordered off Amazon. I even screwed the window shut and wedged a chair beneath the doorknob, like some kid afraid of the boogeyman. But this wasn't the boogeyman. This was real. This was my roommate, and I was living on the wrong side of his door. I told myself I'd go to the cops. I told myself every hour, but I kept hesitating. The photos, unlabeled. The boxes, gone by now, probably. I'd been too panicked to take any evidence with me. I didn't even have pictures. My phone had been in the other room. All I had was my memory, and annoying paranoia that maybe, somehow, he wanted me to find it, that maybe I'd walked into a trap and didn't realize it yet. The real reason I didn't go to the police. I was scared of what would happen if I did, and he found out. Eli had eyes. Somewhere, he always knew where I'd been, what I'd touched, how long I'd lingered near things. I was scared that if I went to the police and didn't walk out of the precinct with him in cuffs, I wouldn't walk out at all. I'd just vanish like the rest. I spent the next week pretending everything was normal. When Eli made coffee in the morning, I made toast. When he asked if I'd seen his screwdriver, I said no, even though I knew it was hidden inside box 3C, next to the bloodstained shoelaces and a postcard from Denver. He acted like nothing was wrong. His movements were just as slow and methodical as before. That same pale, waxy face, those long fingers with the faint dirt under the nails. I watched him closely, his pupils barely dilated, his blinking slow and unnatural. Sometimes I thought he was wearing contacts. Sometimes I wasn't sure he blinked at all. I kept my cool. I kept my distance until the night. I took out the trash. It was a cold Monday night. Maybe 11:30. Eli had left an hour earlier, said he was going to run errands, even though every store in our neighborhood had closed. I waited until I heard his car pull out of the lot, then grabbed the trash bags and headed to the dumpsters behind the building. There were 2 giant metal bins back there, and they stank of decay. I held my breath, flung the bags in, and turned to go. But as I turned, something caught my eye. A flash of white paper, torn pages sticking out of a black plastic bag, already tossed in the bin. Most people wouldn't look twice. Tear, with something about the edges curled, like old notebook paper. I stood on my toes and peered inside. What I saw made my stomach turn. A small, leather-bound journal, partly soaked with some kind of dark liquid. The edges were stained, warped. The pages had been torn in half, some shredded completely. But enough remained to send a cold current down my spine. I climbed into the dumpster. I pulled out the journal and tucked it under my jacket. I didn't even care what I smelled like. Ran back to the apartment, locked my door, and turned on every light in my room. I spent the next 2 hours drying the pages carefully with a hairdryer. And then I started to read. The handwriting was different than the sticky note Eli had left. Looser, sloppier, more frantic. The entries were undated, scattered, and filled with phrases that barely made sense on the first read. But patterns emerged. He wrote in third person sometimes. It's like he was narrating someone else's actions. Other times, he used symbols instead of names. Little hand-drawn emblems. A triangle, a broken circle, a star with 6 crooked points. The most disturbing ones were labeled only with an X. Many of the pages were incomprehensible rants, fever dreams about cycles, hosts, and vessels. One entry stuck out. The 5th doesn't know. The 5th shouldn't know. Not until the eyes are ready. But I feel him watching. He smells like electricity and fear. I'll have to choose earlier this time. The others waited too long. The 5th, that was me. There was another entry, partially intact. That chilled me more than anything I'd seen in his room. To live forever, you have to die the right way. All of them died the wrong way, and so they stayed broken. I'd found the key. It's not the blood, it's the memory. Okay, if I eat it right before they forget, I can stay. There were sketches to dot dozens, dot all of women, bound, silent, eyes scratched out. Some were smiling, others were drawn with jagged lines through their necks. One sketch showed a figure, almost cartoonish, with a smile so wide it split the face in half. Below, it was written, "The one who never sleeps. He watches from behind the mirror. He shows me how to become him." I stopped reading after that. I burned the journal in the kitchen sink. You might think that was stupid. I do too, sometimes. Something about that thing. It didn't feel like evidence. It felt like an infection. Like the more I looked at it, the more something started shifting in my head. It wasn't just a record of his madness. It was an instruction manual, and I think I was starting to understand it. That night, Eli came home just before dawn. I hadn't heard his car. I hadn't heard the door, but when I walked into the kitchen to pour some coffee, there he was, standing in the middle of the living room, still wearing the same jacket, with his boots caked in fresh mud. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. Then he smiled. "Bad dreams?" he asked. I froze. "What? You talk in your sleep again? Something about a fire, and teeth, and someone watching from the mirror?" I didn't respond. He stepped forward, slowly, deliberate. Then, in a voice as calm as someone reading the weather, "You should be careful what you bring into this home. Some things follow you, especially if you look too long." Then he turned and walked into his room. Click. Locked. The next morning. There was a piece of paper slipped under my door. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed. All caps. You're invited to the awakening. 10/18, midnight. Do not be late. Tation. No signature. Just the date. October 18th. 4 days away. I didn't sleep the next night. Not out of fear. Out of obsession. I started reading old cold case blogs, Reddit threads, obscure forums about missing persons, strange disappearances, off-the-record murders. I found multiple reports over the past 15 years with similar patterns. A missing person, no forced entry, all roommates or co-tenants, no suspects ever found, no signs of a struggle. Each case was spaced exactly 18 months apart. I built a timeline, cross-referenced dates. The math lined up perfectly each time. Someone vanished on October 18th, and this year it was my turn. I knew then Eli wasn't just some creep with a fetish for trophies and Polaroids. There was a ritual to this, a pattern, a system, and he'd done it before. Not once, not twice, 4 times. I was number 5, roommate number 5, the quiet sleeper. But he'd made a mistake this time. He'd picked someone who wasn't going to sleep through it. He wanted an audience. He was going to get one. I didn't know Maddie that well, but I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't just leave. She lived 2 floors above us, Unit 3B, graphic designer, worked from home. Quiet, but friendly, the kind of neighbor you wave to in the hallway, or run into at the laundry room and chat with 4 or 5 awkward minutes about detergent brands. She had a dog, little brown mutt named Cricket, that barked at everything but always wagged its tail. The last time I saw her was 5 days before. She vanished. She was in the stairwell, carrying a paper bag from the bodega down the block, and I held the door open for her. She smiled, said, "Thanks, man. Stores weigh 1,000 pounds." I joked about the elevator being haunted, and she laughed. It was normal. And then she was gone. I first noticed a flyer on the building's front door, a simple 8x11 printout, taped to the glass. Her name, a photo, the word missing in big red font. Last seen October 11th. No signs of forced entry. Apartment was locked from the inside. Dog left behind. The cops did a welfare check and found Cricket pacing in circles. Food bowls full. No signs of a struggle. Nothing taken. No note. Just Maddie, gone, vanished, like she was never there. I stood there staring at the flyer for a long time. Something cold and metallic slid into my gut and stayed there. A dread I didn't want to name. Not yet, because even then, I already knew what had happened. Not factually, not rationally, but deep down in that quiet part of your brain that screams when you see headlights rushing toward you, or when you open a door and realize the thing you thought was asleep is wide awake and staring back. I knew. I knew because Maddie's disappearance lined up exactly with the previous pattern I'd found in those cold cases. Each victim vanished 7 days before, October 18th. Each lived within 2 to 3 miles of the last known suspect, Eli, and most importantly, each was referred to by number. I went back to my notes, my scribbled timelines, and half-legible post-its on my closet wall. Victim number 1, female, is 27, disappeared 7 days before October 18th, 2009. Victim number 2, male, 31, vanished exactly 7 days before October 18th, 2011. Victim number 3, female, is 22, last seen on October 11, 2015. Victim number 4, unknown age, no confirmed name, presumed female, missing since the 11th of October, 2019. And now, victim number 5, Maddie, October 11th, 2023. And that was supposed to be number 6, unless I stopped it. Unless I stopped him. I didn't tell the police what I knew. Not yet, because I still didn't have anything real. And I knew what happened to people who stuck their necks out without proof. They vanished, too, I needed something I could show, something undeniable. I knew Eli wouldn't have left evidence in the apartment, not after I broke into his room. He'd covered his tracks before, but there was one thing I hadn't checked yet. His car. Eli drove a dull gray Saturn sedan, one of those forgettable older models you see in parking lots and immediately lose track of. It had a single bumper sticker on the back, a white circle with a triangle through it. I used to think it was some obscure tech brand. Now I wasn't so sure. He always parked in the same spot back of the lot, farthest from the lights. That night, after watching him leave on foot for one of his mysterious 3 a.m. errands, I grabbed my flashlight and a set of lockpicks I'd ordered online under a fake name. My hands were shaking so badly I had to steady myself on the hood before it started. It took me 7 tries to pop the lock. When the door finally clicked open, I expected a car full of trash and old fast food wrappers. Something chaotic, human, but like everything Eli touched, it was clean, too clean. Dashboard wiped down. No papers, no stains, not even dust, except for the glove box. Inside was a small, sealed plastic container, the kind used to store a camera, film, and a folded receipt. The receipt was from a hardware store 2 towns over. It listed duct tape, zip ties, heavy-duty trash bags, garden lime, a shovel to date, October 10th. One day before Maddie disappeared, I nearly dropped it. I reached for the plastic container and popped the lid. Inside were tiny scraps of something, soft and dark hair, human hair, curled and brittle, some of it reddish-brown. Maddie's hair. Beneath that was something worse. A silver ring, bent, engraved with an M on the inside. I turned it over and nearly vomited. There was dried blood in the groove. I was halfway back to the building when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy. I turned fast, flashlight raised like a weapon. Nothing, just the quiet wind and the faint sound of traffic 2 blocks away. I sprinted back to the apartment, took the elevator to my floor, and locked myself in. I stared at that receipt and the ring for hours, and then I made a decision. I was going to the police. No more waiting, no more paranoia. I drove across town to a different precinct, hoping for less red tape and fewer ties to our building. I asked to speak to someone about a missing persons case and showed the officer the receipt, the hair, and the ring. She took me to a back room, asked questions, wrote things down, made copies. I gave them everything I had, even told them Eli's name, his real name, according to what I dug up, Elijah Warren. I expected them to act fast. I expected a raid or surveillance or something. But instead, the officer returned an hour later with a strange look on her face. "Sir," she said slowly, "we checked the license plate. That car is registered to a Robert Jensen. No priors. Registered at an address in Arizona." I blinked. "What?" "No, that's his car. Elijah. He drives it every day." She frowned. "Do you have proof?" I didn't. I hadn't taken a picture of him in the car. Didn't have a photo of him at all. Really? He never let me take one. Even his driver's license had looked fake when I saw it on the counter once, the laminate peeling, the photo slightly off-center. "We'll open a file," the officer said. "But I have to be honest, without something concrete linking this to a crime, can't move forward on a full investigation yet." She handed me back the ring and the hair, sealed in a bag. "Where'd you say you lived again?" I hesitated. "I'd rather not," she sighed. "Suit yourself. But listen, if you think you're in danger, get out of there, whatever this is. It's not worth your life." Scooting, I left the station and drove around for hours. I couldn't go back yet. I didn't even know if Eli was home. When I finally pulled into the parking lot near dawn, I stayed in the car, engine off, windows cracked, and then I saw it. A man standing at the window of our apartment, just standing there, still as a statue. He didn't move for over 10 minutes, just stared down at the lot. I couldn't make out the face, but I knew who it was. He was watching. When I finally went inside later that day, the apartment was eerily quiet. Eli's door was wide open. I tiptoed to the threshold. His room was empty. No chair, no plastic-lined walls, no white noise machine, just a mattress, pillow, and something resting on top of my burner phone, the one I'd used to research him anonymously, to contact that blogger on the cold case forum. It was snapped clean, in half, placed neatly in the center of the bed. I backed out slowly, heart pounding, and shut myself in my room. And then I saw the envelope, a plain manila envelope on my desk. No stamp, no address, just my name, typed in all caps. Inside was a single Polaroid. Me, sleeping, taken the night before. Same pajamas. Same lamp on. Same open book on the pillow. Written along the bottom, tick-tock, 10/18 is almost here. By the time I finished staring at the Polaroid, my blood had run so cold I couldn't feel my hands. He'd been in my room, watching me sleep, inches from my face, close enough to smell my breath, to press that shutter and not wake me. He knew everything. He'd read my notes, seen my timeline, broken my burner phone, left a calling card like this was some elaborate game. And maybe it was. Maybe that's what this had all been. A game I had no idea I'd started playing. And now, the rules were being written with every step I took. The envelope, a Polaroid, the message scrawled at the bottom. Tick-tock, 10/18 is almost here. He was counting down, and I had 5 days left. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in my desk chair, gripping a hammer from the toolbox under the sink, eyes locked on my bedroom door, praying it wouldn't creak open again. Every groan from the old pipes made me flinch. Every gust of wind brushing the windows made my stomach drop. But no footsteps came. No knock. Just the awful silence of a building trying to keep its secrets. I should have left, packed a bag, called in sick to work, gone to a motel 3 counties over. But part of me knew it wouldn't matter. Wherever I went, he'd follow. He wasn't just watching me now. He was hunting me. So instead of running, I doubled down. I went back to the building records, the ones I'd bookmarked weeks ago but hadn't fully explored. The blueprints were uploaded through a zoning database, and at first glance, the layout seemed exactly as I expected. 2 floors, 3 units per floor, maintenance basement, small attic crawl space. Nothing out of the ordinary, but the more I looked, the more wrong it all started to feel. There was something off about the square footage calculations. Unit, well, mine was listed as 600 square feet. That checked out, but to be Eli's room was listed at 340 square feet. That made no sense. I'd seen his room, so it was slightly bigger than mine. So where were the missing feet? I compared the wall positions between our units, grabbed a ruler, measured the hallway, then my room, then Eli's, and I found it. A gap, exactly 6 feet wide, 10 feet long. Not part of any apartment, not listed on any official diagram. A room that shouldn't exist, hidden in the center of the building, windowless, silent, like a chamber embedded in the bones of the floor plan. A perfect hiding place. I waited until morning. I couldn't risk snooping around at night again. When the sun came up, I knocked on our neighbor Alan's door. Middle-aged guy, lived in Tennessee, wore socks with sandals and always smelled like incense. "Hey," I said, "got a weird question. You ever notice the walls in this place don't quite line up?" He gave me a blank look. "What? Like feng shui?" "No, like there might be a hidden room between the units." He laughed, thinking I was joking, but when I held up the building schematics on my phone, his face changed. We spent the next hour walking the halls, measuring, comparing. Alan didn't have much furniture, so he let me tap on his bedroom walls, listening for hollow spaces, and eventually, near the back corner, where my unit and Eli's should meet, I heard it, a different kind of knock, a deeper, deader sound. Not a wall, not insulation, a door. I waited until Eli left again. Around 6 p.m., he walked out wearing his usual hoodie and dark jeans, carrying a tote bag over one shoulder like always. I gave it 15 minutes. Then I slipped into his room with the borrowed master key from the building manager's mailbox, one I'd taken weeks earlier in a moment of sheer paranoia. His room was still stripped. Nothing on the walls, no books, no clothes in the closet, but the floorboards were loose near the back wall, past where the old white noise machine used to hum. One panel shifted under my weight. I knelt down and pried it up, and there it was, a trapdoor, not old, not decayed. This was new wood, cut clean with a recessed metal ring for lifting. It hadn't been there before, or maybe it had, but he'd hidden it too well. I pulled it open. Below was a narrow passage, maybe 6 feet deep. Smelled like dust, metal, and something coppery. I lowered myself in. The space below was a tight concrete corridor, just barely wide enough for my shoulders. No light, no ventilation. I moved forward, using the flashlight on my phone, heart hammering against my ribs. After maybe 15 feet, I found a door, a real door, metal, with a keypad. AF asterisk asterisk ing. Keypad. Who puts an electronic keypad under a trapdoor in a one-bedroom apartment? I stared at it, stunned. The fingers hovered over the buttons, and then I remembered the message, 10:18. I tried 10:18. A beep. The light turned green. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. The smell hit me. It's first rot, bleach, old blood. The room beyond was pitch black until I stepped in and shone the light around. Concrete walls, no windows, one overhead bulb that didn't work. The room was about 10 feet by 6, the exact dimensions missing from the blueprint, and it was filled with things, not furniture, not tools, not anything someone should ever have in their possession. There were Polaroids, hundreds of them, clipped 2-wire lines across the room like some demented art gallery. Each one labeled, dated, numbered, victim 1, victim 2, victim 3, victim 4, and victim 5. Maddie, in some. She was alive, tied to a chair, mouth taped, eyes swollen from crying. In others, my stomach twisted. There were objects, 2 souvenirs, .a, hairbrush, a wallet, cracked phone, keys, jewelry, each one tagged and stored in little drawers along the wall, like some perverse museum archive. And on the far wall, opposite the door, was a timeline, painted directly onto the concrete, a list of names, photos, news clippings, red yarn linking the dots, all of it pointing to October 18th, 2023, just 4 days from now. And under that, it's painted in thick black strokes. Final piece, you. That was when I heard it, the sound of the trapdoor slamming shut above me, then the metal clang of the outer door locking again. I was trapped inside his kill room. Panic hit me like a freight train. I clawed at the keypad, tried 10:18 again, then 12:34. Everything I could think of. Nothing worked. I banged on the door, screamed. No response. Just silence. Suffocating. Endless silence. I stumbled backward, breathing hard, phone shaking in my hand, and then I saw the newest Polaroid one I hadn't noticed before, clipped in the very center. It was me, not sleeping this time, standing in that room, looking directly at the camera, taken just moments earlier. I don't know how long I was. Down there, minutes, hours. Time lost meaning. Eventually, the door opened again. Light poured in. I shielded my eyes, and there he was, Eli, dressed in black, gloves on, calm as ever. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, and then he smiled. That same chilling, polite smile. He used when asking if I wanted the last slice of pizza or if I'd seen his phone charger. He stepped aside, gestured toward the exit. I didn't move. I didn't trust it. But then he said something soft, gentle, almost amused. Not yet. You've still got 4 days. We don't break the cycle. Then he turned and walked away, left the door wide open. I ran back up the tunnel, through the trapdoor, out of his room. I didn't look back. I locked myself in my room and shoved my dresser in front of the door. And for the first time since all this started, I cried, because I understood something horrible. He was letting me go, not because he was done, but because he was waiting. Because this was all part of it. The build-up, the fear, the unraveling, and the finale, October 18th. Wasn't just the next kill date, it was the end, and it would be the most important one yet. It's funny how quickly the line between reality and delusion blurs when you're holding the truth. And nobody believes you. I didn't sleep the night after I found the kill room. I couldn't. I sat curled on my bed with the hammer in one hand and my phone in the other, staring at the screen, shaking so hard I could barely unlock it. I kept telling myself, call someone, tell someone, do something. I started with the police. I reported everything, the hidden room, the photos, the timeline on the wall, the Polaroid of me that hadn't existed 5 minutes earlier. They didn't even send a unit, not at first. The dispatcher sounded bored. She asked if I'd taken photos. I said yes, but when I opened my gallery to attach them, the album was gone. All. The photos, the timeline, the Polaroids, the evidence vanished. It's just a black void where the images had been. I swore I hadn't deleted them. I hadn't even closed the camera app. I scrambled to check the cloud backup. Nothing. No trace. Not even in my deleted folder. It was like they'd never existed. Like he'd reached inside of my phone and wiped it clean. And maybe he had. I marched down to the precinct the next morning, exhausted, wild-eyed, still reeking of fear and sweat. I demanded to speak to a detective. I told them everything again. Word for word. They asked if I'd been drinking, asked if I was on medication, asked if I'd been under stress recently. It wasn't until I said the name Eli Moore that things shifted. One of the officers paused, looked at the other, then excused himself. I thought for a moment that something had clicked, that they knew something, that maybe I wasn't insane after all. But when the officer came back, he was holding a manila folder and wearing a new expression. Pity, he opened the file and showed me Eli's official background check. No priors, no arrests, no mental health history, outstanding warrants, not even a speeding ticket. And he'd passed 2 federal background checks in the last 3 years, one for a government job, one for a tenant application. Are you sure this isn't a misunderstanding? The officer asked gently. Said he was a quiet roommate. Maybe he's just private. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. I told them to go look at the trapdoor. Told them about the room, the keypad, the photos, the final piece message on the wall. They said they'd send someone out to investigate. I knew they wouldn't, and I was right. I went to the building manager next, old guy named Fence, who only came around to collect rent and complain about noise. He laughed when I brought up secret rooms. This building's been standing since '86, he said. I'd know if someone built a murder dungeon under my nose. I told him I could show him, so we walked to Eli's door. I unlocked it with the master key one still had, and the trapdoor was gone. Not just closed, gone. The floorboards had been replaced. Seamless, fresh stain, nails still shiny, like it had never been there to begin with. Jesus, you okay, kid? Vince asked. Some kind of prank. I looked at him, speechless. He left, shaking his head, muttering about calling the landlord. I tried friends, next Amanda from work, Jake, my old college roommate, even Maddie's cousin, Laura, someone I'd barely spoken to before. They listened. They nodded. They told me they were concerned about my mental health. Laura was the only one who didn't outright dismiss me. She asked for proof. I told her about the Polaroids, the lockbox, the notes. She said she wanted to help, but when I tried to show her anything, everything had changed. The notes were gone. The lockbox, empty. Even the scratch marks on my bedroom door had been painted over. Every physical trace, wiped. I didn't know how, but I knew who Eli. He wasn't just stalking me. He was curating my world, editing it, sanitizing it, making sure that when the finale came, no one would believe me. He was dismantling my credibility brick by brick. And the scariest part, he was doing it so perfectly that I started questioning my own memory. Had I imagined the scratch marks? Had I dreamed of the room? Had I fabricated this entire narrative just to give myself a reason to be afraid? No, I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd felt. But belief without proof is madness, and that's what he was banking on the next night. Heard him in the hallway, 3:17 a.m. I know because I was wide awake. I hadn't slept more than an hour a night since finding the room. I heard the faint creak of the floorboards, the slow, careful steps. I turned off the lights, pressed my ear to the door. Breath held silence. Then, scraped metal on wood. A knife, maybe, dragging it slowly across the outside of my door. Not knocking, not trying to come in, just letting me know he was there, listening, waiting. I didn't scream, didn't move, just stared at the crack beneath the door and saw the faintest shadow, unmoving, like he was just standing there, watching. Then the shadow disappeared, and I heard his door close. I stopped going to work after that, started leaving messages with my boss about a family emergency out of town. Didn't even check if they responded. Didn't matter. My world had narrowed to a single point. October 18th. 2 days left. I spent those days preparing. I bought motion sensors and stuck them around my room. Screwed wooden planks across my window. Put tape across my door. It's the kind that would peel if anyone opened it. I wrote a full statement, 5 pages long. Every detail I remembered. Names, dates, descriptions of the room. I emailed it to myself, printed it, mailed a copy to my sister in Illinois, even uploaded a video version, just me, speaking directly to the camera, and scheduled it to autopost to YouTube on the morning of the 19th. If I didn't cancel it, it was the only insurance I had, the only way to scream into the void, in case I disappeared too. And the whole time, Eli acted like nothing was wrong. He smiled when we passed in the hallway. He watered the plants in the window, like always. He even asked me, so casually, if I was excited for the 18th. Respond. I couldn't, because I knew what he meant. The night of the 17th was the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I just sat with the hammer in my lap, all lights on, the video on loop in the background, just in case he came and I didn't make it. And that's when I realized something. The photos in his room, they weren't just trophies. They were steps, a pattern, a ritual. Each victim had their life dismantled first. Isolation, surveillance, erased credibility. Then the kill. The final piece wasn't just a flourish. It was the moment the story became complete. And I was the story now. I was the grand finale. October 18th wouldn't be my death. It would be my transformation from man to memory, from tenant to ghost. Just another Polaroid on the wire. And when the clock struck midnight on the 18th, he knocked once, soft, deliberate. There was something so subtle about the knock that it almost didn't register. One single knock, not a pounding, not a frantic burst of fists, just a gentle rap. like someone tapping a spoon against a teacup. But it might as well have been a gunshot, because it shattered whatever illusion I still had of safety. I sat frozen in place, my legs locked, my hand gripping the hammer so tightly my knuckles had turned bloodless. I hadn't moved from my bed all night, save for bathroom breaks, which I took with the door open and the hammer at my side. And now he was here, right outside my door, midnight, exactly as I'd expected, exactly as he'd planned. I leaned toward the door, quietly slipping off the bed and pressing my eye to the peephole, which I had covered earlier with duct tape. I peeled back a corner and looked. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but I knew better. I didn't trust my eyes anymore, not after everything he'd managed to erase. He could be standing against the wall, just out of view. High, he could be crouched beneath the peephole. He could be watching me through the walls themselves, through vents or holes I hadn't yet found. He'd proven again and again that he could be anywhere, that he knew how to erase traces, to walk between the cracks. But tonight I would see it through. I crept to the door and placed one hand lightly against it, still warm from the heater. No sound. I slid to the floor, heart pounding in my ears, and waited. 5 minutes. 10. I stared at the tape I'd placed earlier across the corners of the door. It was unbroken. Then came the second knock, this time lower, slower, almost amused, like he was letting me know, "Shh, I'm still here." And that's when I realized he was playing with me. I should have been terrified. I should have curled into a ball and cried, or called the police, or tried to scream for help, but I didn't. Something inside me cracked. It was like I'd crossed some invisible threshold between victim and something else entirely. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done running, done doubting myself, done being alone in a reality no one believed. If this was the final chapter, then I was going to write the ending myself. I grabbed my phone and opened the live camera feed, the one I'd set up earlier from my closet, pointing toward the hallway with a discreet Wi-Fi cam. A backup dot the feed, loaded dot, and there he was, Eli dot, standing just outside my door, arms at his sides, dressed in a gray hoodie who'd pulled down. He wasn't doing anything, just standing, head tilted slightly toward the door, like he could hear my breath or my thoughts. My hands trembled, not out of fear, but adrenaline. I switched off the lights, grabbed the flashlight, pulled on my jacket, stuffed a second phone, a burner I'd kept hidden, into my pocket. Tonight, I wasn't going to wait for him to strike. I was going to follow him. I waited until he moved. It was subtle, just a shift of his foot and a turn of his shoulder. But I watched him through the live feed as he slowly backed away from my door and walked down the hall, toward the stairwell. Not his usual direction, not toward his room, somewhere else, somewhere deeper. I waited 30 seconds. Then I moved. The hallway was colder than it should have been. I stepped lightly, my sneakers silent on the carpet, flashlight off, phone in my hand, tracking his heat trail through the building with my hidden camera feed. He didn't go downstairs. He went up to the 5th floor, the one with the storage units no one used anymore. The whole floor had been sealed off last year due to a mold problem, or so we were told. But I remembered hearing footsteps above me late at night. I chalked it up to the rats. Turns out I've been hearing Eli. I climbed the stairwell slowly, each step an echo chamber of doubt. What the hell was I doing? What was I expecting to find? My breath felt like fire in my chest. My heart jackhammered so hard I was afraid he'd hear it through the walls. When I reached the 5th floor, the door was propped open, a cinder block wedged underneath. I hesitated, then stepped through. The hallway was dark, save for the emergency exit lights, dim red glows that bathed everything in a kind of surgical, apocalyptic calm, dust-coated. The floor, The air smelled like old wood and mildew. Rows of storage units stretched in both directions, like metal coffins stacked side by side, and at the far end, a single unit, door half open. I crept closer, each step echoing louder than the last, my hand white-knuckling the flashlight, ready to swing. Inside the unit was studio, not an art studio, a kill studio. The walls were lined with acoustic foam and soundproofing. A large plastic tarp stretched across the floor, blood-stained and wrinkled, like it had been crumpled and reused a dozen times. There was a tripod in the middle of the room, camera attached, facing a metal chair bolted to the ground. Beside the piano chair, a set of instruments, blades, scalpels, wire, even pliers, all neatly arranged on a medical tray. And at the back wall, photos, rows and rows of Polaroids, each victim, each face, each final moment. And there, among them, was me. Multiple shots, me sleeping, me showering, me laughing on the balcony, talking on the phone. And one final photo I hadn't taken, me sitting on my bed, holding the hammer, eyes wide with fear, taken from inside my room. My stomach flipped. I turned and nearly vomited in the corner. How long had he been filming me? How many times had he entered my room while I slept? How close had I come to dying? And then I heard it, a click behind me. Not a gun, not a knife, a camera. I spun. There. He was Eli, framed in the doorway, smiling, camera in hand. "Showtime," he said. He stepped inside slowly, like a performer taking the stage. Brushing the tarp aside with his foot, I lifted the hammer and aimed the flashlight at his face. "You stay the hell away from me." But he didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "You weren't supposed to come up here yet," he said, almost wistful. "You skipped the last act." I backed toward the wall. "This ends tonight." He tilted his head. "You're right. It does." Then, without warning, lunged. I swung the hammer. It connected a crack against his arm, and he stumbled sideways, dropping the camera. I ran for the door, but he caught my jacket, yanked me back, and slammed me into the chair. The wind shot out of my lungs. My head rang. He reached for something, a syringe from the tray, and lunged again. But I kicked him square in the knee and scrambled to my feet. Don't know how long we fought. Minutes, seconds, an eternity. He was strong, but I was desperate, and desperation is stronger than evil. I swung the flashlight this time right into his jaw, and he dropped like a sack of bricks. I stood over him, gasping, every muscle trembling. Blood dripped from his mouth, but he was still breathing, still smiling. I didn't wait. I ran out the door, down 5 flights of stairs, out the building, into the street, and I didn't stop running until I reached the 24-hour diner on Fairview and collapsed inside, screaming for someone to call the police. This time, they listened. They found the studio, the chair, the tray, the camera, still recording, all of it. They arrested Eli that morning, but the footage was worse than anything I'd imagined. There were 21 videos on the SD card. 20-1 victims, and one final file labeled 22_final_cut_me.mp4. It was me sleeping. The timestamp was just 6 hours before the knock at midnight. He'd already filmed my final scene. He was just waiting to finish it. They still don't know his real name. Eli Moore was just one of many aliases. He's wanted in 3 states, 2 countries, dozens of missing person cases. Suddenly have leads, but his trial hasn't started because he won't speak to anyone. Not the police, not the lawyers, not the psychiatrists. But when they asked if he had anything to say to me, he smiled and said one thing: roll credits. They didn't let me watch all the videos. The police, the ones from Eli's studio, they said it was for my own safety, that no civilian needed to see that kind of thing, so that I should be grateful I survived and focus on healing. I saw enough. More than enough. I saw the thumbnails. I saw the way each one was labeled, numbered, categorized. Subject 5, panic stage. Subject 13, eye removal sequence. Subject 17, final convulsion, slow-mo. Oh. Each file told a story, a sequence, choreography of horror. He wasn't just killing people. He was documenting it, like art or like ritual. And I couldn't shake one thing from my mind. The words he said to me just before they dragged him away. Roll credits. I didn't sleep for days, even with police cars parked outside my building, even with a trauma counselor checking in twice a day. Even after they deep cleaned the 5th floor and sealed off the hallway again, I couldn't close my eyes because whenever I did, I saw them. Not just Eli, the others. It started with the photos, the ones they returned to me from the evidence locker, okay? The pictures of me that Eli had taken. There were 37 in total. Most were from inside my room, a few from the gym, one from my office downtown. But 4 of them I didn't recognize at all. Different building, different furniture, same me, same clothes I'd never worn, same frightened expression. I knew I was being watched, except I wasn't in them alone. In the background of one, I could clearly see 2 people standing behind me. One, tall, bald, wearing gloves. The other, I swear to God, it looked like Eli, but not quite him. His eyes were wrong, too wide, too black, and his smile stretched way too far. I showed them to the detective Morales, the one leading the case, and she went pale. I thought he worked alone. I whispered. She didn't answer right away. She just said, "We're starting." To think this may go deeper than we expected. They moved me out of my apartment. Witness protection. Sort of. A temporary relocation to a state-run safe house 2 towns over. It's the boxy studio with 1 entrance, no windows, and cameras in every corner. But I felt safer there until the dream started. The first one was normal, I guess. At least at first. I was standing in a long, dark hallway, lit only by flickering overhead bulbs. One by one, the lights began to go out behind me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I knew something was walking toward me from the dark, but I couldn't see it, only hear it, dripping, wet, smiling. I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat. Classic PTSD, right? Only thing was, when I sat up, the lights in the safe house were out. The emergency backup lights were flickering, and on the wall above my bed, something dark and sticky, was a single word: cut. The police said it was a prank, that maybe I did it myself in my sleep, that I was dreaming, walked in my sleep, and smeared chocolate syrup or something. Except it wasn't chocolate, it was blood, and it wasn't mine. After that, I begged to see Eli again. I knew it was insane. I knew I should be distancing myself from the case, not diving back into it, but I needed answers. I needed to know what he meant when he said, "You skipped the last act," and who those other people were in the background of the photos. They arranged a visit, 1 hour, supervised. He was being held in a high-security psychiatric facility now, after he faked a seizure and lockup and stabbed a guard with a sharpened spoon. 3 officers stood between us, and he was chained to the table, but he smiled when he saw me, like I was an old friend, like he'd been waiting. "Did you like the ending?" he asked. I sat down slowly. My hands shook so hard I had to tuck them under my thighs. "Who were they?" I whispered. He tilted his head. I saw them. In the photo, behind me, the others. His smile widened. "You saw them? Good. That means they're almost ready to meet you." Swallowed. "Meet me? You were never the last subject," he said softly. "You were just a catalyst, the keyframe to the 3rd act." "What 3rd act?" I asked. "What the hell are you talking about?" He leaned forward, chains clinking, and his voice dropped low. "There are 33 cuts in a perfect sequence. You were number 22. 11 remain. eh? And they've already been cast. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because in that moment, I realized something even worse. The guards behind me weren't reacting. They weren't scribbling notes or stepping in to stop him. They were standing completely still, expressionless, almost as if they were listening. I ended the visit early. I pretended I was just overwhelmed, that I needed air. But the truth is, I couldn't stand being near him for another second, because deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something unnatural. It wasn't just murder anymore. It was theater that night. Back in the safe house, I scrolled through forums, cold cases, true crime threads, looking for anything that connected to Eli's words. That's when I found it. A Reddit thread from 5 years ago, posted by a now deleted user, titled, "Help, my roommate's short films might be real murders." The post described a series of VHS tapes found in a shoebox. Homemade movies showing masked figures torturing bound victims in front of an audience of silent, still observers. Each tape ended the same way, a voice whispering, 11 more to go. The dates matched. The victim count matched. The style, location, even the furniture in the background. It all lined up with Eli's footage. But the most chilling part, the user ended the post with a warning. If you're reading this, they've already picked you. Watch your back. Watch your reflection. They like to watch you watching them. I didn't sleep that night. I left the lights on, the camera on, the recording on. I even kept the door open a crack to feel some fresh air. But just before dawn, I noticed something on the wall, barely visible in the shadows. More writing, same dark fluid. This time, it's 3 words. Stay in frame. I stopped recording myself. That might sound backwards, given what I'd discovered. The warnings, the blood messages, the footage, the figures in the photos. But something had changed after the last message appeared on my wall. Stay in frame. I kept thinking about it, repeating it in my head, over and over again, because it wasn't just a threat. It was direction. Stage direction. They weren't watching me through windows or holes in the wall. They were watching me through cameras. Mine. It was the morning after I saw that message that I unplugged everything: my phone, laptop, tablet, even the bedside alarm clock with the little camera lens that had been part of the safe house's surveillance package. I ripped it out of the wall. The power strip sparked. Smoke coiled from the outlet. I didn't care, because I knew, with a sick certainty, that something, had been watching every second of my life since Eli had moved in. And maybe, long before, but pulling the plug didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. That first night without electronics, I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt lonely. No, not lonely. That's not the right word. Exposed, like something had been depending on that signal. Some barrier between me and it. And now that I turned it off, it was closer. I started hearing whispers, not in the walls, inside the mirror. I would pass the bathroom door, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd see movement. Not mine. A lagged reflection. Too slow, too late, as if something behind the glass was pretending to be me. And failing. On the 3rd night after the blackout, I broke. I plugged everything back in. The lights, the charger, the clock, the cameras. Immediately, things went quiet, too quiet, at 3:17 a.m. My phone buzzed. No caller ID, just a gray screen and a single word. Play. I didn't press anything, didn't have to. A video opened on its own. No audio, just grainy footage of my bedroom. This room from the corner ceiling angle. The same one the safe house surveillance camera was supposedly feeding to the police. Only this video wasn't from the police. This one was from 2 nights ago, before I unplugged everything. And in it, I saw myself lying in bed, eyes wide open, unmoving, and at the edge of the frame, just for a second, a shape crawled into view. Not walked, not stood. crawled, too long, too thin, all elbows that stopped at the foot of my bed. Then, frame by frame, it tilted its head sideways till it was perfectly parallel to the floor. Then it grinned, just before the video cut to black. I saw its mouth stretch wide enough to cover half its face. Inside that mouth were teeth just like Eli's. I screamed so hard I tore my throat. When the police arrived, they found me collapsed in the corner, clutching my phone to my chest like a child hiding a secret. But by then, the video was gone, wiped, erased without a trace. I told Detective Morales everything. No more hiding. No more pretending I could figure this out on my own. I laid it all out. The messages, the figure in the video, the mirror, the Reddit thread, the whispered warnings, all of it. She listened quietly, took notes. Then, when I finally ran out of breath, she said something I'll never forget. "You're not the only one seeing them." I froze. What? There have been 3 others, all connected to Eli. Roommates, co-workers, distant family. One of them disappeared. D1 ended up in a psych ward. D3 tried to burn his own eyes out with bleach. I covered my mouth. He said it was the only way to stop the others from following him. She continued. He said, "They crawl through reflections." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but the next thing she said cemented something. In my brain, I still haven't been able to shake. We recovered a hidden drive from Eli's apartment. Morales told me. Encrypted, but my tech team cracked it. Inside were hundreds of video files, thousands of stills. She slid an envelope across the table. "You need to see these." Inside were printed screenshots from several of the videos. They all looked similar: dim lighting, a single bound figure in a chair, camera focused, time stamp in the corner. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. Each image had something in common, in every single one. Behind the subject was a mirror, and in every mirror, there was a second version of the person, always slightly different. Wider smiles, blacker eyes, some hunched, some grinning, some upside down, as if hanging from the ceiling inside the glass. The reflections weren't reflections. They were watching, waiting. That night, I made a decision. If these things were following me because of Eli, if they were part of some twisted film project or death cult production, I needed to get ahead of it. I needed to go back to where it started. The studio, the place beneath the apartment, down the sealed hallway, through the wall he tore open. The crime scene had been released. The landlord wanted nothing more to do with it. No one would go near the building anymore. Too much bad press, too much blood. I still had my key. I went at night, took a flashlight and a crowbar. The hallway still smelled like rot. The bleach didn't cover it. The walls still bore the faint outline of the words he carved into them. Rehearse, record, repeat. I made my way to the false wall, the one they said had been partially destroyed. But it had been rebuilt, not by the cops. Someone else had sealed it back up. It took 15 minutes of digging, but I got it open. The studio was exactly as I remembered. Tripods, blood, lights dangling from the ceiling like meat hooks. But now, there were mirrors everywhere, floor to ceiling, no angles left uncovered. And on the floor, the center of the room, was a single camera still powered on. The screen flickered, footage from inside. My safe house live. That was 3 nights ago. I haven't left since. I don't know if I can, because I think once you're in the sequence, as Eli called it, once they've cast you, it's no way out, no off stage, only the next scene. And right now, I'm writing this because it's the only thing keeping me sane. The mirrors are whispering again, and I know that when I look away, they're going to step through. The studio, now open again before me, felt alive. The mirrors weren't just reflective surfaces. They were portals, windows, eyes. I spent hours pacing the room, shining my flashlight over every inch of glass, tried to avoid looking into them, but it was impossible. The reflections seemed to warp and twist, sometimes showing me places that weren't really there, places I never wanted to see. One mirror showed me a forest at night, dripping with fog and lit only by flickering lanterns. Another revealed a cold, tiled room, stark and sterile, with shadows lurking just out of sight. Okay, there were flashes of bodies, bound and broken. Silent screams, frozen midair. But the worst was the mirror directly opposite the chair. It reflected me perfectly, except the reflection smiled, and the smile didn't reach the eyes. It was Eli's smile. Started recording everything with my phone. I knew I needed proof, not just for myself, but in case I didn't make it out. Every reflection held secrets. One glass whispered Eli's name when I passed. Another flashed a name I had never heard. The director. I pieced together that Eli was only an actor in a larger performance, as part of a grim cast that extended beyond him. The others, as Eli called them, weren't human. They were something else, beings trapped in the mirrors. The cameras, the film reels, feeding off fear and control. They thrived in the frames. Moving between realities, I found a journal tucked behind one of the mirrors. Its pages brittle, scrawled with dates, names, and cryptic notes. Eli had been keeping a log of his kills, yes, but also of rituals, chants, sequences to open the final cut. The last entry chilled me. Tonight, the mirrors will open. The frames will crack. The final cut begins when the shadows cross the threshold. The audience is ready. The play is eternal. I knew what I had to do. Destroy the mirrors. End the sequence. Free myself. I grabbed the crowbar and started smashing. Glass shattered. Shards flew. Echoes bounced off the walls. But the mirrors regenerated. Each crack spread like a web, healing instantly, and the whispers grew louder. Suddenly, from the largest mirror, a hand emerged. Thin, pale, claw-like. Ed grabbed me, pulled me toward the glass. I struggled, screamed, but it was too strong. I felt myself slipping into the mirror. The world, verted. Light flipped to darkness. The room twisted, and then I was somewhere else. An endless black void filled with flickering images, past victims, live scenes, horrifying moments, frozen in time. The others surrounded me, their eyes black voids, their mouths stretched wide in twisted grins. They spoke in voices like broken film reels. You are the final piece. You will join the eternal cut. I fought, called out, pushed back with every ounce of strength. Suddenly, a light pierced the void, my own voice, screaming through the darkness. I grasped the edge of the mirror, pulled myself back, exploded through the glass. I woke up on the studio floor, shattered glass all around me. The mirrors lay, broken, silent, still, but I know they will come back, because the performance never truly ends. And, cupped in the script, waiting for my next scene. After escaping the mirror's grip and destroying the studio's glass, I thought I was free. I was wrong. The next morning, the police confirmed the studio was gone, collapsed from years of neglect, with no sign anyone had been down there recently, yet I could feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from every corner of my apartment. The mirrors were shattered, but something else had filled the void. It started small, flickers and reflections, shadows at the edge of my vision. Then, people, strange faces in crowds, lingering a little too long, watching a little too intently. I began noticing figures who didn't quite fit the janitor at work, whose eyes never blinked, the barista who smiled too widely, neighbor who never spoke but always stood in the darkened doorway. One night, I received a message on my burner phone, a grainy video showing a group of people, faces obscured, watching a screen that displayed my own apartment. Their whispered words were chilling. Next scene, someone said, "The audience is ready." They weren't just watchers, they were participants, complicit observers in this grim play. And worse, they might be waiting for their cue. I started piecing together that Eli's victims weren't random. They were chosen cast members. The audience and the performers blur into one, caught in a cycle that feeds on fear and silence. When I tried to tell Morales, her face went pale. "They're everywhere," she said quietly. "It's not just a story anymore." The feeling of being watched became unbearable. I stopped going outside. Every mirror felt like a window into a hidden room full of those watchers, their faces pressed against the glass, grinning. One evening, I caught movement in my bedroom mirror, someone standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing, but in the glass, the reflection lingered, its mouth stretched impossibly wide. I realized then that escaping the studio wasn't escaping the performance. The play had only moved backstage. I'm writing this now as a warning. If you ever feel eyes on you where there should be none, if shadows smile when no one's there, don't look away, because the audience is watching and the next scene is about to begin. After realizing the audience was no longer just watching, but actively involved, I knew I had to act. I couldn't stay trapped in this nightmare, a pawn in a sick, never-ending play. The cycle had to be broken, but how? I started by gathering everything I had, the photos, the journal pages, the cryptic notes, and the video clips that Morales had been reluctant to share. I compiled them into a single file, a dossier that spelled out the twisted truth behind Eli and the others. I tried to find a way to expose it all, to bring light to this shadow theater. But every time I sent an email or tried to upload the files, they disappeared. Accounts were locked or hacked. Devices malfunctioned. It was as if the cycle was fighting to stay hidden. One night, in a desperate attempt, I recorded a full confession. It's pouring out everything: the studio, the mirrors, the watchers, the messages. I planned to release it on a public platform and make sure someone, somewhere, saw it. But the next morning, the recording was gone. In its place, a new message scrawled on my wall in blood-red paint: "Don't break the fourth wall." I understood then this wasn't just about watching or performing. It was about control, controlling the narrative, the story, and the players. The fourth wall was real, and crossing it had consequences. I reached out to Morales again. She arranged a meeting in a secluded location, away from any potential watchers. She handed me a sealed envelope containing a worn, leather-bound book, an occult text rumored to hold rituals for binding spirits and breaking curses. Together, we began experimenting with the rituals, desperate to sever the connection between the mirrored entities in our world. We burned sage, chanted invocations, and marked symbols on the walls. But every ritual seemed to backfire. Mirrors cracked spontaneously. Shadows deepened. The whispers grew into screams. One night, after a particularly intense ceremony, I awoke to find myself staring into the mirror's depths. Instead of my reflection, I saw a twisted theater stage, bathed in cold, blue light. The audience was silent, faceless. A spotlight hit me. I was on stage, performing the final act. I screamed. No sound came. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. The line between reality and nightmare was gone. The cycle was tightening. Morales warned me that the watchers might be trying to pull me fully into their world, to make me the ultimate final piece. But she also revealed a terrifying truth. Breaking the cycle might require a sacrifice, not just of possessions or freedom, but of identity. To escape, I might have to give up the part of myself that watches, that narrates, that remembers. In other words, to stop the performance, I might have to become invisible. Days passed in a blur. I stopped responding to calls. I stopped looking in mirrors. I covered every reflective surface with cloth or paper, but the whispers followed me. The shadows moved with me. The watchers closed. In dot, and then came the knock. 3 soft raps on my bedroom door. Midnight. I hesitated. The hammer was in my hand. My breath caught, and I realized something else. The cycle wasn't just about watching. It was about participation, and the audience was waiting for me to step forward to take my final bow. The knock came again. 3 deliberate, measured raps that echoed in the hollow silence of my room. Midnight. I gripped the hammer tighter, but my hands trembled, not with fear, but exhaustion. I'd been running this endless race with shadows, whispers, and reflections that weren't mine, and now the moment had arrived. I wasn't just the protagonist anymore. I was the final act. I forced myself up from the bed, every muscle screaming in protest. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last, as if invisible chains tried to hold me back. The knock came once more. I looked through the peephole. Nothing but darkness. I opened the door slowly. No one was there, just an old, leather-bound book resting on the floor. I picked it up, the same book. Morales gave me the occult text, only now its pages were open to a new chapter I hadn't seen before, titled simply, The Exit. I flipped through the pages, reading the ritual carefully. It promised freedom, a way to sever the bond between this world and the one beyond the mirror. But there was a catch, a price to leave. The performer must sacrifice their reflection, their self. To step out of the frame was to lose the part of you that watches, the part that remembers, the part that is. It meant becoming invisible, ghost-like. A shadow in the audience, rather than the center of the stage. I sat down, heart pounding. The idea of losing myself, of losing what made me me, was terrifying. But so was the thought of being trapped forever. A puppet for the others, another victim in their endless play. I looked around my room, at the cracked mirrors I'd covered, at the flickering shadows pooling in the corners, at the whispers curling round me like smoke. I knew what I had to do. I gathered candles, salt, and the items from the book, prepared the room, started the ritual. As I spoke the words, the air grew thick. The temperature dropped. My reflection shimmered in the cracked glass, distorted and flickering. I felt something inside me start to unravel. Memories blurred, thoughts slipped away, but I pressed on. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. The room plunged into darkness. The whispers turned into voices, chanting, mocking. I was no longer alone. Figures formed from shadow and light twisted, grinning watchers. Their eyes black holes, sucking in all warmth. They closed in. I was terrified, but also resolute. The ritual's final words left my lips, a brilliant flash. The watchers screamed. The mirrors shattered into millions of shards. Glass rained down. I felt myself pull away from my body, a numbness spreading. A part of me disappeared. When I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else. No room, no mirrors, no shadows, just endless blackness. But I was free. Free of the watchers, free of the cycle, or so I thought, because now I'm not the narrator, not the protagonist. I'm something else, a shadow in the wings, the quiet observer, waiting, because every story needs an audience, and every performance demands a final bow. When I woke up, I wasn't in my body anymore, at least not the way I understood it. I was weightless, faceless, but more aware than I had ever been before. I was floating in darkness, an endless void, lit only by flickering scenes playing out in front of me. The faces, the screams, the broken moments I'd tried so desperately to escape. They were all there, frozen in time. I realized then what had happened. By sacrificing my reflection, myself, I had become part of the audience. an eternal watcher. It was a cruel irony. I had fought to break the cycle, to escape the nightmare, but in doing so, I had traded my freedom for a prison far worse, a cage with no bars, the invisible threads pulling me toward new victims, new stories, and now I was one of them, one of the watchers, the silent observers behind the curtain. The others welcomed me, not with kindness, but with acceptance. They showed me the endless rows of mirrors, each a window to a life trapped in fear, a scene waiting to. It played out. They told me the story never ends. Each performance leads to another, and the audience grows with every lost soul who takes the final bow. Another watcher joins the ranks. I watched scenes unfold. New victims, terrified. Old wounds reopened. Each play as chilling as the last. And yet, no matter how many I saw, it was never enough. There was always another story, another act, another cycle to endure. Sometimes, I tried to reach out to warn the next protagonist, but my voice was silent, my presence invisible. I was trapped in a role without lines. No one could hear me, no one could see me. But the loneliness was worse. To be an eternal spectator, powerless, to act doomed to witness horror over and over. I was both cursed and condemned. Then, a flicker, a new scene, familiar, a figure standing before a cracked mirror, eyes wide with fear. I recognized her. She was beginning the sequence. The cycle was restarting, and I, the watcher, had to decide to intervene and risk breaking the rules, or remain silent and watch her become the final act. As the whispers returned, filling the void like a dark tide, I realized one terrible truth. This nightmare is endless. The curtain never closes. The play goes on, and I am trapped forever behind the curtain. I never thought there could be an end. After all, I had endured living through Eli's twisted performances, watching shadows crawl from the glass, and finally becoming one of the silent watchers trapped behind the curtain. I believed my fate was sealed, eternal imprisonment, an audience member condemned to watch horror unfold, powerless to intervene. But deep inside that void, fragile ember of hope remained, a whisper of escape. It started with a memory, not my own, but a fragment, a glimpse of someone else's past, a woman trapped like me, desperate to break free. Her name was Leela. She was a performer who'd vanished years ago, swallowed by the cycle, but somewhere, hidden in the endless loop of mirrored horrors, was a secret she left behind, a crack in the frame. I searched through infinite scenes, endless reflections. It was like chasing shadows, but I found it, a hidden message, not in words, not in screams, in light, a pattern, a rhythm, a ritual buried deep within the performances. Oh, key to breaking the cycle. I took a chance, called it my last scene. I reached out not with words or screams, but with intent. I wove the pattern through my thoughts, concentrating every ounce of awareness. The watchers noticed. The others stirred. The void shook. The curtains trembled. Then came the choice. Return to the nightmare, to endless play, the dark stage forever, or step through the cracked mirror too. The unknown I chose. I stepped. The world inverted. Colors exploded. I felt myself unraveling and reforming, breathing air again, sensing light and shadow anew. I was outside, free, but forever changed. The scars of the cycle marked me, a silent understanding in my eyes, because I knew the play never truly ends. It just waits for the next cast, the next audience, the next final bow. So, here I am, telling you this story, not just to warn, but to remember, because sometimes the darkest plays hide in the quietest corners, and the most terrifying monsters live in reflections. If you hear a knock at midnight, if your reflection smiles when you don't, if the shadows watch you and no one is there on, don't look back, and don't forget, you might already be on stage. Story 2. I never expected that a simple weekend trip to an estate sale would turn into one of the most unsettling experiences of my life. I'm not someone who hunts for antiques or rare collectibles, but I do enjoy finding little pieces of history owned. Books, photographs, letters, anything that feels like a whisper from the past. That day, the estate sale was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, in a house that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The kind of place where the air feels thick with memories. The living room was packed with dusty furniture, faded wallpaper peeling off the walls, and stacks of boxes filled with miscellaneous things. I was digging through a pile of old magazines when I spotted a plain, unmarked cardboard box shoved in the corner, half hidden behind an armchair. It looked like it had been forgotten. Curious, I pulled it out and peered inside. The box was filled with bundles of yellowed letters, tied with faded ribbons, and loose sheets of paper covered in handwriting that was instantly recognizable as decades old. The smell hit me immediately, a sharp, musty scent of old paper mixed with something faintly metallic. It's a smell I can't really describe, but it always pulls me in. I leafed through the bundles, each tied separately, most addressed to various people. Some were love letters, others just mundane correspondences about the weather or local events. Most seemed innocent enough, but then something caught my eye. A single envelope, unbound and placed right on top. It was addressed simply to M and dated March 1989. The handwriting was shaky and hurried, almost like it was written in secret or under duress. When I unfolded the letter, my breath caught in my throat. It was a cry for help. The letter was from a woman named Eleanor. Her words were fragmented and terrified. She spoke of feeling trapped, of shadows watching her every move, and of someone close who was dangerous, someone she feared deeply. She begged whoever found the letter to help her, to save her before it was too late. That name, Eleanor, struck a faint chord in my memory. Later, after I put the box carefully in my car, I remembered reading about a woman who vanished without a trace from this very town about 30 years ago. Eleanor was her name. The thought sent a chill down my spine. What were the odds that I'd find a letter like this from a woman who had disappeared 3 decades ago? And more importantly, why was this letter hidden away, forgotten in a dusty box in an abandoned house? I decided then and there that I needed to find out what happened to Eleanor. But the more I started digging, the deeper and darker the mystery became. After I got home from the estate sale, I placed the box carefully on my dining table and took a deep breath. I hadn't wanted to look at the letters until I was alone, away from prying eyes, and could give them my full attention. The house was quiet, too quiet, and as I closed the front door behind me, its fading sunlight cast long shadows through the windows. I sat down and carefully removed the letter that had first caught my eye. It was on thin, yellowed paper, folded in half. The edges were frayed and brittle. The handwriting was erratic, as if the writer was rushed or scared. I started reading. If someone finds this, please understand. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. They watch me every day, whispering in the dark corners where no one else dares to look. I am trapped, and I fear those who are supposed to love me are the ones I must hide from. Please help me. My name is Eleanor. I'm scared, and I don't know who to trust anymore. If you can, find me. The letter was dated March 14th, 1989, and signed simply Eleanor. As I read it, a knot tightened in my stomach. This wasn't just an old letter. It was a desperate plea for help from someone in real danger. The words were raw, fragmented, with emotion, and there was an urgency that made me feel like I was holding a fragment of someone's life hanging by a thread. I read the letter again, slower this time, trying to catch every detail. Eleanor mentioned a few cryptic things: a man she feared, someone close to her, a place she sometimes escaped to, but never for long. There were references to locked doors, cold nights, and shadows moving just beyond sight. It was clear she was afraid of being found, or maybe more terrifying, afraid of what would happen if she wasn't. I wondered if this letter had ever reached anyone back then, if anyone had tried to help her, 'cause if Eleanor disappeared after writing this, it meant help never came. There were other odd things in the letter, details that didn't quite add up. She mentioned a phone call that never came, a secret signal she hoped someone would notice. It was like she was leaving breadcrumbs, hoping the right person would follow them and find her. I felt an intense urge to trace her story, to learn everything I could about this woman. But where to start? Her name was common enough that it could lead me down many wrong paths. I needed more. That night, I pulled out the other letters in the box. Most were addressed to M, Tame, or initial that kept appearing. As I sifted through them, I realized they formed a loose correspondence, possibly between Eleanor and someone she trusted, maybe a sibling or a close friend. Some letters were dated months before the desperate one. Others were after it, but the handwriting and style varied. Some were neat and calm, others scribbled and panicked. One letter caught my attention. It was from someone signing M, dated just days before Eleanor's disappearance. It spoke of concern for Eleanor's mental health and her sudden withdrawal from friends and family. There was a hint that Eleanor might have been hiding something or running from something unseen. I had to know more about Eleanor's life before the letter. Who was she? What had driven her to write something so desperate? Was she really in danger? Or was this the ramblings of a troubled mind trapped in a bad situation? The more I read, the more I realized that the box of letters wasn't just a collection of old notes. It was a silent testimony to a woman's pain, its fear, and struggle to escape something terrible. And whatever it was, it remained hidden in the shadows. Over the next few days, I dived into online archives, public records, and old newspapers from the town where the letters had originated. I learned that Eleanor was indeed a real person, Eleanor Whitaker. She was 26 when she vanished in 1989 from a small town not far from where I'd found the pox. Her disappearance had made the local news briefly, but quickly went cold. The police investigation was limited, with few leads and no suspects. Family members had moved away. Her case was mostly forgotten, just a name on an unsolved missing persons list. But there was one strange thing found. Some local forums and discussion boards had theories about Eleanor whispers of cods, a troubled marriage, rumors of abuse, and even suggestions of cult involvement. None of it was verified, just vague stories passed down like folklore that only deepened the mystery. I felt myself pulled into Lena's story more and more with every letter I read and every fact I uncovered. I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in those words was a key, a clue to what really happened to her. And maybe, just maybe, that key was still waiting to be found. The box wasn't just a box anymore. Oh, it was a portal into a past that someone desperately wanted to keep buried. And now that I had opened it, there was no turning back. After spending days poring over the letters, articles, and online discussions about Eleanor, I realized that to understand her desperate plea, I needed to dig deeper into who she was. Not just a name on a missing persons list, but a real woman with a life, relationships, and struggles. What led her to vanish without a trace? What secrets was she hiding? I started by visiting the local library's archive, an old brick building that smelled like damp paper and dust. The librarian was hesitant at first, wary of someone asking about a decades-old disappearance. But when I explained my interest was purely personal, She handed me a stack of microfilm reels containing newspapers from the late 1980s. The headlines were surprisingly sparse. Eleanor Whitaker's name appeared a handful of times. A report about a small local fundraiser she helped organize, a brief mention of her engagement to a man named David, and then, just a few weeks before her disappearance, an article about a domestic disturbance at their residence. The details were vague, but it suggested trouble. I copied the articles and scanned them carefully, piecing together a timeline. Eleanor was a 26-year-old woman, well-liked in her community, who seemed to have a promising life ahead of her. She worked at the local library, loved books and gardening, and was known to have a close-knit group of friends. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Further digging turned up interviews from neighbors. One described Eleanor and David as the perfect couple, while another whispered about late-night arguments and unexplained bruises. The more I read, the more the story turned dark. I found a police report filed just days before Eleanor's disappearance. The officers were called to the Whitaker residence for a disturbance, but no arrest was made. The report mentioned a man matching David's description, aggressive and evasive when questioned. Eleanor was said to be reluctant to press charges, fearing repercussions. This wasn't just a case of a missing woman anymore. It was potentially a case of domestic abuse, silenced fears, and a life on the edge of despair. I felt a pit in my stomach. The letters suddenly made more sense. Eleanor's coded cries for help weren't paranoia. They were warnings from a woman who knew her life was at risk. That night, I revisited the letters. There was one I had overlooked before, a letter that was more detailed than the others, sent to M. It spoke about Eleanor's fears of David, how he controlled her, watched her, and isolated her from friends and family. She hinted that David was involved with a group or circle of people who kept their actions hidden behind closed doors. The letter was chilling. It described how Eleanor felt trapped, like a prisoner, in her own home, afraid to seek help because the people who could protect her might be complicit. My hands trembled as I read it aloud. Kier, please don't stop looking. He's not who everyone thinks he is. They protect him. The fear in those words was raw and unmistakable. As I continued researching, I'd uncovered old court records indicating that David Whitaker had a history of violent behavior and was connected to several suspicious incidents in the town, assaults that were mysteriously dropped or dismissed. There were rumors of bribery and intimidation, whispers that he was untouchable because of who he knew. I started to see a picture forming. Eleanor was caught in a web of control and fear, and when she tried to escape, she vanished. The question that haunted me was, did she manage to get away, or was she silenced? But the deeper I went, the more I realized how little concrete information existed. Eleanor's case was almost erased, lost in time. Friends who might have helped had moved on or were unwilling to talk. Police files were incomplete or missing. And then there was the name M, the person Eleanor trusted enough to write those letters to. I had no idea who that was yet, but I felt certain that finding them could unlock even more of the truth. I spent hours trying to track down anyone named M connected to Eleanor. Few possibilities emerged: a childhood friend, a sister, a co-worker, but every lead ran cold. Still, every scrap of information I found brought me closer to understanding the woman behind the letters, a woman desperate for freedom, haunted by shadows that refused to let her go. That night, I sat alone with the box of letters spread out before me. Outside, the wind rattled the windows and the house felt colder, heavier somehow, as if Eleanor's story was seeping into the walls. I didn't know it then, but I was only beginning to unravel the threads of a story far darker than I ever imagined. A story that would change everything I thought I knew about that quiet town and the secrets it kept hidden for decades. The days that followed felt like a strange blur. I was consumed by Eleanor's story. Each letter I unfolded felt like stepping further into a shadowed world. I wasn't sure I was ready to explore, but I couldn't stop. There was something about these letters, this woman's voice reaching out across decades, that pulled me in like a current I couldn't resist. I returned to the box with fresh eyes, sifting through the bundles tied with brittle ribbons, each bundle carefully preserved, yet heavy with silence. The letters weren't arranged chronologically, which made piecing together Eleanor's final days feel like assembling a broken puzzle in the dark. Many of the letters were between Eleanor and M, the confidant, someone she trusted with the deepest fears she couldn't share with anyone else. At first, the tone of their correspondence was casual, even warm. They spoke of everyday things, books Eleanor loved, local news, memories from childhood. But as the months progressed, the tone darkened. The letters became fragmented, coded, even desperate. One letter stood out. It was postmarked just 2 weeks before Eleanor's disappearance. The ink was smudged, the handwriting shaky. If you get this, know that I am scared beyond words. David's anger grows. I hear footsteps in the hall at night, shadows lingering near my door. I'm trying to hold on, but I don't know how long. I've found a place, a refuge, if only for a little while, but I can't tell you where. If I disappear, look for the old mill by the river. I'll leave you the rest in the letters. The mention of the old mill piqued my interest immediately. I knew the town well enough to remember there was an abandoned mill on the outskirts, a relic from a bygone industrial era. It's now little more than a ruin hidden by overgrown trees and vines. That night, I researched the mill's history. It had been shuttered for decades. No official use, no known residents. It's just a forgotten landmark with a reputation for eerie noises and ghost stories. It seemed an unlikely refuge, but for Eleanor, desperate and afraid, it may have been her only hope. The next bundle of letters was even more cryptic. Eleanor seemed to refer to them, though never by name. Kay, she hinted at a group watching her, controlling her life like puppeteers. Sometimes she used code words or blank spaces where she'd crossed out words in panic. In one letter, Eleanor wrote, "They say the walls have ears, and I believe it now. No one trusts anyone anymore. If they catch me here, I fear it will be the end. Please keep looking." I'm holding on by a thread. I realized that Eleanor's, they might have been more than just David. Maybe a group, or a family secret, or a dangerous circle hiding in plain sight, piecing together. Kay, these hints was like trying to read a book with torn pages. I wondered who Eleanor meant by they. Was it neighbors, law enforcement, a secret society? A thought sent a shiver down my spine. The letters also revealed Eleanor's growing isolation. She spoke of friends who stopped returning calls, family who stopped answering letters, and the crushing loneliness of living in fear. One letter mentioned a doctor she trusted, but she never named the person, only a nickname, Doc. I made a note to see if there was any record of a doctor who had treated Eleanor, hoping it might offer another angle. Then I came across a letter that broke my heart. It was dated just days before Eleanor vanished. She wrote, "I think they know. I'm trying to escape. I feel it in the cold looks, the quiet whispers. If you find this, please don't give up on me. I dream of the day I'm free, but fear I won't live to see it. Promise me you'll keep fighting." The rawness of those words stuck with me, echoing in the quiet rooms of my house long after I had finished reading. By now, the letters weren't just a collection of old writings. They were a lifeline, a voice that had survived decades in silence. Begging to be heard, I started cross-referencing names and places mentioned in the letters with public records. I found a few interesting leads. The Dr. Doc could have been Dr. Samuel Greer, a local physician who retired in the early 90s. I managed to track down an old address where he had lived. In the old mill, I decided to visit it. I wanted to see for myself if there was any evidence Eleanor might have left behind, or if the rumors about that place held any truth. But As I planned the trip, I began feeling uneasy. A gnawing sense of being watched crept into my thoughts. I'd catch glimpses of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, hear footsteps behind me when no one was there. I told myself it was paranoia, that digging into a cold case like this would unsettle anyone. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The letters kept coming back to me, Eleanor's voice growing louder in my mind, her desperate hope for rescue reverberating across time. I knew I was far from finished. The truth was buried in those pages, tangled in the past, waiting to be uncovered. And whatever was out there watching, waiting, wasn't ready to let me find it. By the time I reached the 5th chapter of this investigation, both literally and figuratively, I was deep into Eleanor's letters, feeling like I was chasing a ghost through a maze of faded ink and whispered secrets. Every time I thought I had uncovered something clear, a new puzzle piece would slip from my grasp, leaving behind only questions and cold shadows. One evening, after hours of reading, I noticed something strange. In one of the letters, the one dated just a week before Eleanor vanished, there was a pattern that didn't seem random. Certain words were underlined, others circled. Some letters were capitalized strangely, and a few paragraphs had letters that, when read in sequence, formed an odd series of numbers and letters. At first, I thought it was just Eleanor's nervous handwriting, but the more I looked, the more I suspected it was a code, a hidden message Eleanor had buried in her letter, hoping someone would find it and understand. I scanned the letter carefully, writing down every underlined word, every capitalized letter out of place, and every number. Then I started experimenting with basic ciphers, simple letter substitutions, acrostics, and number 2 letter conversions. It was slow going. Hours passed with no breakthrough, and I felt the weight of frustration settling in. But then, suddenly, it clicked. The pattern wasn't random. It was a message. By piecing together the letters and numbers, it spelled out a phrase: "Meet me where the water runs still." That line didn't make sense at first, but I knew it had to be a clue. Eleanor wasn't just hiding from her captors. She was trying to lead someone, anyone, to a specific place, a place where she might have been hiding, or where evidence could be found. I thought about the town, the old mill, in the nearby river. There was a spot along the river, known locally as the Still Waters, a quiet bend where the water ran slow and clear, surrounded by thick trees. It was the kind of place that didn't see many visitors and could easily be a secret refuge. The idea of Eleanor going there sent a chill down my spine. If she left clues to this place in a hidden message, maybe it was important. Maybe it was where she hoped someone would find her, or what was left behind. I knew I had to visit, but before I could, I received another surprise. Tucked inside the box of letters was a small, folded note. It wasn't typed or handwritten in the same style as the other letters. Instead, it was a printed slip of paper with a single line: "Stop digging before it's too late." There was no signature, no explanation, just the ominous warning. I felt my heart race. Was this a prank? A coincidence? Or was someone watching? Me, aware of my investigation? The note unsettled me, but it didn't stop me. If anything, it strengthened my resolve. Eleanor's story deserved to be told, and I wouldn't be intimidated by a vague threat. So, the next morning, I packed my camera and set out to find where the water runs still. The journey wasn't far, but the forest around the river was thick and unwelcoming. Branches scratched my arms, and the ground was uneven and muddy from recent rains. The quiet was absolute, broken only by the sound of the slow-moving river. When I reached the bend, the stillness felt unnatural. The water was eerily calm, reflecting the overcast sky like a black mirror. I started looking for anything unusual, discarded items, signs of habitation, or anything Eleanor might have left behind. After nearly an hour of searching, I found something: a small, rusted tin box, buried beneath a cluster of roots near the riverbank. Inside, wrapped carefully in oilskin, were more letters. But these weren't the same kind of correspondence. They were more personal, raw, a journal of sorts, written by Eleanor herself. The pages were filled with details that hadn't appeared. In the letters to M, counts of nights spent hiding, moments of hope and despair, and cryptic references to people who lurked just beyond the trees, watching. One entry stood out. I know they're close. I hear their voices in the wind. I'm not sure how much longer I can hide, but I refuse to be their prisoner. My hands trembled as I read. This wasn't just a cold case anymore. This was a woman's desperate fight to survive, frozen in time, and waiting for someone to hear her. As I packed up the box and started to walk back, the forest seemed to close in around me. The silence was thicker, heavier, like the trees themselves were warning me to leave. But I couldn't. Not yet, because somewhere out there in the shadows, maybe just beyond the reach of the daylight, Eleanor's story was still alive, and I was the only one left who could tell it. The next logical step was clear. I needed to visit the place where Eleanor had last lived, the house she called home in those final, terrifying months. If her letters spoke of captivity, secrets, and escape, then maybe the walls of that house still held answers. Be there was something there that the police missed, or something no one dared to look for. I found the address in an old property record, a modest story house on the edge of town, nestled at the end of a quiet street. I had driven past it a few times, but now, standing outside, the weight of decades pressed down on me. The house looked abandoned. The paint was peeling, the windows were grimy and dark, and the garden was overgrown with weeds that reached toward the cracked sidewalk like desperate hands. I took a deep breath and approached the front door. It was locked, but old enough that the latch gave way with a soft click when I pushed. Inside, the air was thick and musty, the scent of neglect and time. Dust motes floated in the beams of late afternoon light, filtering through torn curtains. The house was eerily quiet, except for the creaks of old floorboards beneath my feet. Every step echoed as I wandered through the rooms, imagining Eleanor moving through this space, her sanctuary, her prison. In the living room, I found scattered fragments, a cracked picture frame, faded photos of a young couple smiling, a chipped teacup left on the table. Nothing seemed overtly sinister, but the atmosphere felt heavy, like the house remembered pain. I moved to the bedroom. The wallpaper was stained and peeling, the bed frame rusty, but what caught my eye was a small notebook lying beneath the broken dresser drawer. I picked it up carefully and flipped through the pages entries, written in hurried, sometimes trembling script. It was Eleanor's journal. Her words here were even more raw than the letters. She wrote about David, the man she feared, in stark, painful detail, about nights filled with shouting, doors slammed, and silent tears. About moments when she thought she'd be found, dragged back into a nightmare she couldn't escape. One entry chilled me to my core. He watches me, even now. Behind the smiles and kind words to neighbors, he's waiting. I don't know how much longer I can hide who I am or what I'm planning. I also found a crumpled piece of paper tucked inside the journal. It was a rough map with a red circle, drawn around a spot near the old mill, the same mill mentioned in the letters that confirmed the importance of the location. Eleanor had marked it as a place of significance, maybe her last hope. Exploring further, I found a trapdoor in the floor of the basement, hidden beneath a loose rug. It led to a small crawlspace, damp, cold, and cramped. Inside, there were remnants of what looked like a makeshift hideout, a blanket, a flashlight, and a small pile of papers. I sifted through the papers, heart pounding. Among them was another letter from Eleanor, written in code, more frantic than before, and a few photographs, blurred, grainy, but showing shadows of figures watching the house from a distance. The realization hit me hard. Eleanor had been watched maybe by David or by others complicit in her captivity. She had tried to hide here, right under their noses. As I packed the papers to take with me, I heard a noise, the scrape of a branch against the window pane. I froze, heart thudding. Outside, the street was empty and still. No cars, no people. I told myself it was just the wind, but the house didn't feel empty anymore. Before I left, I took one last look around. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer. I could almost hear Eleanor's voice whispering through the cracks, begging to be heard. That night, as I sat with the letters and papers spread out, I felt something shift. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was part of the story now. Again, whatever darkness had trapped Eleanor wasn't finished with me yet. After my visit to Eleanor's last known home, I knew I needed to understand more about the town itself, the people who lived there, the stories they told, and the secrets they might still be guarding. Sometimes the truth hides not just in documents or letters, but in the whispers between neighbors. In folklore passed down over decades, I started visiting the local library again. Not for archives this time, but to speak with the librarian, Mrs. Caldwell, an elderly woman who had lived in town her entire life. At first, she was polite, but reserved when I mentioned Eleanor's disappearance. Then, her expression shifted. Something wary flickered in her eyes. "Eleanor Whitaker," she said softly. "That's a name that still stirs the past around here." She told me there were rumors back then, rumors of a dark presence in the town, a shadow that didn't want certain truths uncovered. People whispered about a powerful family with deep roots who kept the town's skeletons locked away. They said Eleanor might have stumbled onto something dangerous. Mrs. Caldwell warned me gently but firmly. "Some things are better left buried. If you keep poking around, you might stir up trouble that's been sleeping for too long." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't turn away. If Eleanor's disappearance was tied to something bigger, something that scared people enough to hush it up for decades, I had to know. I also visited the local diner, a place where the town's older generation gathered to share stories and gossip. Sitting at the counter, I struck up conversations, careful to tread lightly. Some people were reluctant to talk, eyes flicking nervously around. Others offered fragments, a whispered warning here, cryptic mention of the others there. One man, a retired sheriff's deputy, told me about off-the-record investigations into strange occurrences in the area, unexplained disappearances, sightings of figures lurking near the woods, and odd gatherings at the old mill. He hinted at possible collusion between local officials and certain families, suggesting Eleanor's case might have been deliberately buried. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, a town haunted by its past, willing to protect its darkest secrets at any cost. As I walked the streets that evening, I noticed a car slowly following me. The license plate was obscured. My heart raced. When I looked back, the car sped away. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe my imagination. But the warning from Mrs. Caldwell echoed in my mind. That night, a note slipped under my door, similar to the one before. "Stop now. Leave before it's too late." No signature again. I realized Eleanor's story wasn't just history, it was alive, tangled with people who still had something to hide, and who wanted to keep me silent. Yet, just when I thought I had a grip on Eleanor's story, the letters, the places, the warnings, something happened that made everything I believed wobble on its axis. It's a reminder that some mysteries don't stay buried, and sometimes the past reaches out in the most unsettling ways. It was a cold evening, and the house was quiet, except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the soft hum of the heater. I was sifting through the letters again, cross-referencing dates and places, trying to piece together a timeline that made sense. The more I looked, the more I realized how fragmented Eleanor's last days had been. Fear, hope, desperation. tangled in every word. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Tamed. I live alone. No friends or family knew the details of this investigation, so I wasn't anticipating a visitor. Cautiously, I approached and peered through the peephole. The porch was empty. Confused, I opened the door. Nothing but a plain, unmarked envelope lay on the welcome mat. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, typed neatly on the front. I picked it up carefully, a cold chill running down my spine. Inside, folded precisely, was a letter on heavy, creamy paper, the kind used in old-fashioned stationery sets. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it. The letter was typed, no handwriting, no signature, and dated just yesterday. I read the words aloud, slowly. If you're reading this, it means you're too close. Stop digging. Some secrets are meant to remain in the dark. You don't know what you're dealing with. For your own safety, leave this alone. They are watching. Drop the letter on the table, my heart pounding wildly. How had this letter arrived here? Who had sent it? The handwriting and style didn't match anything from Eleanor's era or the letters I'd been reading. This was recent. Someone was actively watching me, sending me warnings. I sat back, overwhelmed. Was I being followed? Had someone been inside my home? The thought was terrifying. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank. Someone in the town trying to scare me off. Or maybe, just maybe, someone connected to Eleanor's disappearance, or to the people she feared was still out there. Over the next days, the warnings escalated. I found notes slipped under my door in the dead of night brief. Ominous messages typed or scribbled with different hands. Leave before it's too late. You shouldn't have opened that box. Some truths will kill you faster than silence. Each one was more unsettling than the last. I began noticing strange signs around my house. Small footprints in the dirt outside my window. The faint smell of cigarette smoke, even though no one smoked in the house. And once, a chilling whisper, just as I was falling asleep. Fear mixed with determination. Tame, I couldn't back down. Eleanor's voice was loud in my mind, begging to be heard. I was the only one left listening then. Something impossible happened. One night, as I sat cross-legged in my living room, going through letters once more, my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. I hesitated, but answered dialed on the other end. A voice, eerily familiar, whispered my name. The voice was faint, wavering, distorted by static. "I'm here," it said, barely above a whisper. "Please, help me." My blood ran cold. I asked, trembling, "Who is this?" No answer, just static. Then the call ended abruptly. My mind reeled. Was this a trick? A hallucination? Or could it have been Eleanor? The idea seemed impossible, but the voice, that voice, haunted me long after the call. I replayed it over and over, searching for clues, for something real. The timing was uncanny. The warnings, the call, the notes. It was like someone or something was trying to communicate or warn me. I shared the experience with a close friend, someone skeptical but supportive. They suggested it might be a prank or someone messing with me, but they agreed it was unsettling enough to consider involving the police. I called the local detective assigned 2 cold cases, sharing the letter and the strange events. He was cautious, but agreed to look into the letter's origin. But his tone warned me to be careful. Sometimes curiosity can be dangerous. "Okay," he said quietly. That night, I set up cameras around my house, hoping to catch whoever was leaving the notes or lurking. Outside, days passed with no activity, and I began to doubt myself. Maybe the fear was making me see things. But then, on the 3rd night, the cameras recorded movement, shadowy figures moving near my porch, lingering just out of clear view, then disappearing. I watched the footage, with a sinking heart. Whoever it was, they knew I was watching. The story had shifted. It wasn't just about Eleanor anymore. It was about me, about how far I was willing to go to uncover a truth that someone desperately wanted to stay hidden. I realized the danger wasn't just in the past, it was now. And the question couldn't stop asking myself was, how deep was I willing to go before I became the next missing piece? After the chilling phone call and the mounting warnings, I knew I needed to focus on the one lead that might break the case wide open. The mysterious M. The person Eleanor trusted enough to write to in almost every letter. Lever M was they could hold answers about Eleanor's final days. The people who threatened her. Maybe even what ultimately happened to her. But tracking down someone only identified by a single initial from over 30 years ago wasn't easy. It felt like chasing a ghost. I started by combing through public records and old phone books from the area around the time Eleanor lived there. I looked for anyone with a name beginning with M who had connections to Eleanor's family. Members, close friends, co-workers. Several possibilities came up. A Mary Whitaker, a cousin who had moved away. A Michael Reed, a childhood friend. And even a Marjorie Mills, Eleanor's co-worker at the library. Each had faded footprints in the town's history, but none had obvious links to the letters, or so it seemed. I reached out to the local historical society and some community groups, hoping someone might remember M or be willing to talk about Eleanor. Most were tight-lipped, wary of reopening old wounds or stirring up uncomfortable memories. One woman, retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Jensen, agreed to meet me. She remembered Eleanor vividly, a bright, quiet woman who kept to herself, but who had confided in her about feeling trapped. Mrs. Jensen paused thoughtfully when I asked about M. Eleanor didn't speak much about M publicly, she said, but I always thought it was her sister, Margaret. They were close, but Margaret left town shortly before Eleanor disappeared. People said they had a falling out. That was a breakthrough. Margaret Whitaker, Eleanor's sister. But tracking her down wasn't easy. Public records showed she'd moved out of state, changed her name after marriage, left little digital trace. I spent hours digging through genealogical databases, social media, and old phone directories. Finally, I found a woman matching Margaret's profile, living in a city several states away. I reached out with a carefully worded message, explaining who I was and what I was investigating. Days passed with no reply. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived. The message was brief. I don't know what you want or why you're digging up the past. Lena is gone, and some memories are better left buried. I'm sorry, but I can't help. It was curt, cold, but also tinged with pain. I didn't give up, responded with questions, gentle and respectful, hoping to break through the wall. Weeks later, I received a long, hesitant reply. Margaret revealed that Eleanor had confided in her about the abuse and the strange people who surrounded David, a secret circle that wielded power behind closed doors. She admitted that the sisters had grown apart after Eleanor's disappearance. Burdened by fear and guilt, Margaret was scared to talk, but she shared fragments of memories, whispers about threats, warnings to stay silent, and Eleanor's last, desperate attempts to find safety. Her words deepened the mystery and made me realize how tangled the truth was, woven with fear, betrayal, and silence. I asked if Margaret had any letters or documents from Eleanor. She hesitated, then said she did. Some she'd kept hidden, fearing the repercussions of revealing them. She agreed to send copies. When they arrived, the letters were different, raw, personal, filled with Eleanor's fears and hopes. There was also a journal entry from Margaret herself, counting her attempts to protect her sister in the moments when she feared she failed. Reading through those pages, I felt closer to Eleanor than ever before. The pain, the desperation, the fight for survival, it all came alive. But there was also a warning. The letters hinted that Eleanor had uncovered something dark, something that powerful people wanted erased. And now, after all these years, that darkness was stirring again. I knew I was stepping into something far bigger than a simple cold case, something dangerous, and the silence that had protected the town for decades was beginning to crack. By the time I reached this point in Eleanor's story, I knew that whatever I was about to uncover would change everything. The letters from Margaret had been a breakthrough, but also a warning. Eleanor hadn't just vanished because of personal troubles. She had stumbled upon something sinister, something that had roots deep in the town's history and stretched into the shadows of its most respected families. Margaret's letters hinted at a secret society, a group operating in the background, influencing local affairs, silencing those who threatened to expose them. This group, sometimes referred to only as the Circle, was whispered about in hushed tones by those who dared speak at all. I dug into public records, old court documents, and local news archives, hunting for anything that could shed light on the Circle. There was little to go on at first. Vague mentions of unexplained disappearances, mysterious fires, sudden resignations from town officials. But then I found something, an old article from the 1970s, buried in a dusty microfilm reel, described the disappearance of a young woman named Linda Collins, a friend of Eleanor's. The article raised questions about the police investigation, noting that it had been closed abruptly without clear cause. Further digging revealed that Linda had been looking into the Circle, just like Eleanor. Her disappearance had never been solved. The pattern was chilling. Eleanor wasn't the first to vanish after getting too close, and Margaret's letters made it clear Eleanor had discovered something dangerous in one letter. Lenore wrote, "They control everything, the police, the courts, even the families we trust. I don't know who's safe anymore. I disappear? No, it's because I tried to shine a light on the darkness. I started mapping connections, family names, business dealings, and political ties, all pointing back to a small group of influential people in the town, some of whom still held power. I contacted an investigative journalist who had covered corruption in small towns. He confirmed the rumors of the Circle, but warned me to be careful. People die or disappear when they cross those lines," he said grimly. The weight of the truth pressed down on me. Eleanor's disappearance was not just a tragedy, it was a warning, and I was now on the same path. With the dark truth about the Circle looming over the town, I knew the next step was to pinpoint exactly where Eleanor had been in her final days. The letters, journals, and hidden notes all hinted at a place she had hoped might be safe, or at least where she had planned to make a last stand, returning to the old mill by the river, the place Eleanor described in her coded letter. I began a thorough search, walking through the overgrown paths, examining every broken window and forgotten corner. The mill was a skeleton of its former self, wooden beams rotting, machinery rusted and silent, but it was the perfect place for someone to hide. As I carefully explored the building, discovered a hidden room beneath a loose floorboard in what used to be the manager's office. The cramped space was just large enough for someone to squeeze into, and inside were traces of a makeshift shelter-rolled blankets, empty cans, and a small pile of papers. Among those papers was a journal, Eleanor's journal. It chronicled her last days, her attempts to evade them, her desperation, and her fleeting moments of hope. One entry, dated just days before her disappearance, was particularly haunting. "If I'm found here, please know I tried. The shadows close in, but I am not afraid. Not yet." That line resonated with me deeply. Eleanor had taken refuge here, hiding from the people who wanted her gone. But what happened next? Did someone find her? Did she escape? I collected every piece of evidence carefully, photographing the space and bagging the documents as I left. The mill, I felt the weight of those walls, silent witnesses to a hidden struggle that had gone on long before I arrived back home. I cross-referenced the journal entries with police records and local rumors. There were reports of strange noises at the mill in the weeks following Eleanor's disappearance, unexplained footprints, and whispers of a woman's voice carried on the wind. But no one ever investigated further. Eleanor's final refuge was a secret the town had chosen to forget. I realized that understanding what happened at the mill could be the key to solving this mystery. But every step closer to the truth felt like I was entering deeper into the shadows where danger waited, silently watching, ready to strike. The days following my visit to the mill felt strangely quiet. The weight of Eleanor's journal and the evidence I had uncovered pressed heavily on me. But the silence around me was deafening. No calls, no emails, no messages. Just an unsettling stillness, as if the town itself was holding its breath. That quiet shattered one evening when my phone rang unexpectedly. The screen showed an unknown number, but I felt compelled to answer. "Hello?" I said cautiously. The voice on the other end was low, distorted, almost robotic. It whispered a single phrase that made my blood run cold. "Find the key." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, heart pounding. Who had called me? Was it a prank? A warning? Or something else entirely? Find the key echoed in my mind, haunting and cryptic. I scoured Eleanor's letters, journals, and the documents from the mill, searching for any reference to a key, literal or metaphorical dot in one of her final journal entries. Eleanor wrote, "The key is hidden where the past and present meet. Only then will the truth be unlocked." The cryptic message sent me down another rabbit hole. I began mapping out locations mentioned across the letters and journals, places Eleanor had frequented, landmarks near the mill, even spots in town with historical significance. One location stood out, the old town hall, a building no longer in use but still standing at the edge of the main street. It was a place where past and present literally converged. The old archives were kept there, alongside modern municipal offices. I decided to investigate. Inside the dusty, dimly lit archives, I sifted through piles of documents, property, deeds, court files, old police reports. Hours passed with no sign of a key. Then, tucked inside a folder marked Whitaker Estate, I found a small, yellowed envelope sealed with a faded wax stamp. Inside was a rusted key, along with a note in Eleanor's handwriting, for when I can't speak. My heart raced. What did this key open? The note also contained coordinates, a precise location near the river, not far from the mill. The pieces were starting to come together. I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Eleanor had left me this key for a reason, guiding me deeper into the mysteries she could never fully escape. As I prepared to follow the coordinates, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me again, waiting for me to make my move. The darkness I had been chasing wasn't just a shadow from the past. It was alive, patient, and hungry. The key felt heavy in my pocket as I set out early the next morning, the chilly dawn air thick with mist and anticipation. Eleanor's note had given me precise coordinates, a point along the riverbank near the old mill, the very place where she had hidden and left her last desperate messages. I couldn't ignore it. The feeling of being watched had grown stronger. But this was the moment I had to face. I packed my camera, flashlight, and gloves, ready for whatever I might find. The path to the river was overgrown, the remnants of last night's rain making the earth soft and slippery beneath my boots. As I moved through the woods, the silence pressed in around me, broken only by the distant call of birds and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Reaching the river's edge, the air was cool and still. The water flowed gently past, reflecting the gray sky. I scanned the bank carefully, searching for any sign of a hidden entrance or a clue that Eleanor had left behind. The ground was scattered with day-bright branches, old leaves, and shards of glass, but nothing that stood out immediately. Then, something caught my eye, a faint outline in the muddy bank, almost like a doorway or a hatch, barely concealed beneath a tangle of roots and moss. Kneeling down, I brushed away the dirt and uncovered a rusted metal cover, hinged on one side. The key in my pocket suddenly felt like it belonged here. With effort, I inserted the key into the lock. It was a tight fit, but with a satisfying click. The cover swung open to reveal a narrow, descending stairway carved into the earth. A wave of cold air surged upward from the darkness below, carrying a musty, earthy scent. I swallowed my fear and switched on my flashlight, illuminating the crumbling stone steps as I carefully made my way down at the bottom. I found myself in a small, subterranean chamber, damp and dimly lit by a single, cracked window high above, ground level. The walls were lined with faded graffiti and strange symbols some I recognized from Eleanor's letters. Others, more obscure, hinting at rituals or secret gatherings. In the center of the room stood a wooden crate, old and rotted, but surprisingly intact. Hesitated, then pried it open. Inside were more documents, folded papers, photographs, and a small leather-bound book. The photographs were startling. Blurry images of men in suits gathered in a circle, faces obscured by shadows or masks. Among them, I recognized the name David Whitaker in typed captions. These were records of the circle's meetings, proof of the powerful group Eleanor had feared. The leather-bound book was a journal, but not Eleanor's. It belonged to someone else, a member of the group, chronicling their deeds, their control over the town, and their ruthless suppression of dissent. Reading through the pages, my stomach churned. The book detailed how Eleanor had uncovered their plans and intended to expose them. It spoke of threats, intimidation, and the final decision to make her disappear. My hands trembled as I realized the full scope of the conspiracy. This was more than a local tragedy. It was a calculated cover-up by a secretive, dangerous cabal. As I prepared to leave, I heard a faint noise from above, a branch snapping, footsteps crunching on leaves. Panic surged through me. Someone was coming. I grabbed the documents and scrambled up the stairs, locking the hatch behind me. The forest seemed unnaturally quiet as I hurried back toward the road, heart pounding. I knew then that Eleanor's story was far from over. Whoever wanted to keep these secrets hidden was still out there, and now, so was I. After escaping the underground chamber near the river with the incriminating documents, I thought the worst was behind me. But that night, the shadows that had long hovered just beyond my vision stepped forward in a way that was impossible to ignore. I was home, poring over the journal I'd found, every word a damning revelation of the circle's influence and cruelty. When the power suddenly went out, the house plunged into darkness. Fumbled for my phone, the screen casting an eerie blue glow as I tried to steady my breathing. Then my phone vibrated. A text message illuminated the screen. "You're getting too close. Stop now or suffer." The same fate. No number, no name, just a cold warning. My heart raced. I locked all the doors and windows, triple-checked the security cameras, and sat in the darkest corner of my living room, clutching the journal like a lifeline. The threats weren't just words. They felt tangible, a presence closing in. The next day, a strange car was parked near my house when I left for the grocery store. The driver watched me silently, their face obscured by sunglasses and a cap. I snapped a photo and sent it to the local detective helping with the case, hoping he could trace the vehicle. But the fear wasn't just outside. One morning, I found the front door slightly ajar, despite locking it the night before. Inside, nothing seemed missing, but on the kitchen table lay a single white rose, a symbol I'd seen in one of the journal's photographs, associated with the circle's initiation rituals. It was a chilling message. They knew where I lived. I realized then that Eleanor's fate was a warning, and now I was in the same crosshairs. Yet, despite the danger, I couldn't stop. Every letter, every photo, every piece of evidence was a thread pulling me deeper into a web woven decades ago. I decided to share what I'd found with a trusted journalist friend, hoping public exposure might offer some protection. But even as I typed the email, the screen flickered the same static I'd heard on that mysterious phone call. The darkness was watching, waiting, and it wasn't going away. The tension had been building for weeks. Every step I took toward the truth about Eleanor Whitaker pulled me deeper into a darkness that refused to let go. I knew the risks, but I couldn't walk away. Eleanor's voice echoed in my mind, pleading to be heard, demanding justice after the latest threats. I realized that staying hidden was no longer an option. I needed to confront this head-on. I arranged to meet with Detective Harris, the officer cautiously helping me at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. I brought all the evidence: Eleanor's letters, Margaret's correspondence, the journal from the secret room, and the photographs exposing the circle's meetings. We sat in a corner booth, whispering as we went through each piece. Harris was visibly shaken, the weight of decades of corruption and silence hitting him hard. "This is bigger than I imagined," he admitted. "We'll need a warrant to access certain records and possibly protection for you." Together, we planned our next moves carefully. That night, I received another call, this time from Margaret Whitaker. She sounded tired, but resolute. "There's one place you need to see," she said. A place Eleanor hoped would finally bring the truth to light. She directed me to an old family cabin hidden deep in the woods outside town, a place Eleanor had kept secret even from most family members. The next day, I drove through winding dirt roads until the cabin appeared, weathered and covered in moss, a relic untouched by time. Inside, the air was thick with memories. On the worn wooden table lay a bundle of papers tied with a faded ribbon, Eleanor's final writings, pages filled with names, dates, and confessions, revealing the circle's darkest crimes, disappearances, bribes, and even murders disguised as accidents. There was also a recording device, a tape labeled simply for the world. I played it. Lena's voice, trembling but defiant, filled the room. She detailed her discoveries, the threats, and her hope that someone would find the truth if she didn't survive. Listening, I felt the gravity of her sacrifice, returning to town armed with this final proof. Detective Harris and I coordinated with the trusted officials and journalists to expose the circle. The fallout was immediate. Investigations reopened. Arrests followed. The town began to reckon with its buried sins. But the scars remained. Families torn apart, trust shattered, and the community forced to confront the darkness it had hidden for so long. For me, the journey changed everything. Eleanor's story was no longer just a cold case. It was a testament to courage and the power of truth. And though the shadows lingered, I knew one thing: her voice would never be silenced again.